Today is Thursday, November 9th, 2023. It is approximately 6:33 p.m. Welcome to the City of Riviera Beach Planning and Zoning Board meeting. If you wish to speak on any item on this agenda, please complete a public comment card and provide it to the Planning and Zoning staff. Cards must be submitted prior to board discussion of an item. Now let's take a moment of silence. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Davidson, do we have acknowledgement of board member absence notification?
Mr. Chair, can we start with a roll call, please?
Oh, sorry about that, jumped ahead. Roll call.
Yes, thank you. Anthony Brown,
Present.
Renee Burgess, James Gallen,
Here.
Margaret Shepherd, William Wiley,
Present.
Frank Fernandez.
Present.
You have a quorum.
Good. Moving on to the next one, acknowledgement of board member absentee.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I did hear from Board Member Burgess that she'd be out this evening.
Thank you. Acknowledgement of board member vacant positions.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we currently have a vacant board member position, and the first and alternate positions are also vacant.
Mr. Sermons, I would assume you've already talked to city council on this matter so they can select a candidate from the respective district.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have been in conversation with council on this. As you know, there is an ordinance before council about the restructuring of the board. And so depending on the outcome of that vote, we're waiting to make appointments based on that because it could change the number of voting seats and alternates. So that is scheduled for second reading at the end of this month. So shortly thereafter, staff expects to bring forth the appointments to the city council.
Excellent, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No additions or deletions from staff, but we would recommend a reordering of the agenda. Out of respect of the applicants and members of the community here to hear the applicant presentations here, we are recommending that item A be moved to the very end after item G. That would be all from staff as far as additions or deletions to the agenda.
Any disclosures by board members?
None received.
Do I have a motion from this board to accept?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
yeah, I did get a call from the owner's representative for, that appears in items 7C to F.
So what you're saying is you had calls from community members regarding C through F?
Sir.
Anyone else?
Myself also.
So you both had calls from, that will not affect your vote on this matter?
The information that was basically given to us was just a review of what was going on, but it was nothing, no questions asked, anything. It was just an explanation of what they were here for.
So it will not affect your vote?
Not at all.
Do we have a motion to accept the agenda with the changes made by Mr. Sermons?
So move. Second.
Anthony Brown,
Yes.
James Gallen,
Yes.
William Wiley,
Yes.
Frank Fernandez.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Now we move on to the approval of meeting minutes, August 24th, 2023, and October 12th, 2023.
So move.
Second.
Anthony Brown,
Yes.
James Gannon,
Yes.
William Wiley,
Yes.
Frank Fernandez.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Any unfinished business, Ms. Davidson, that you know of?
None, Mr. Chair.
Can we now move on to new business, starting with B?
Item 7B, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, amending City Code of Ordinance, Chapter 31, ZA 23-0006, on behalf of CB 2020 LLC applicant, approving a text amendment application to permit townhomes reviews as a special exception in the RM 15 zoning district, multiple family dwelling district, providing for applicability, conflicts, severability, and codification, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you.
For the record, I'm Kurt Thompson, Principal Planner for the Development Services Department, and I'll be presenting this case. We're trying to get the PowerPoint queued up here. Well, let me just go ahead, Mr. Chairman. No, that's not good. Okay. Ms. Davidson has already told you the essential aspects of the case. What you have before you is the project location. This is a text amendment, board members and Mr. Chairman. Even though we have an applicant who owns the properties at 1118 and 1154 Cabana, this is a text amendment to the RM 15 zoning regulations, which would affect all RM 15 zoning districts. What the applicant has in mind is to look at an amendment to the RM 15 zoning district and then they will come back later with a full-blown project. Okay. Right now, townhomes are not allowed use, not even a special exception, much less an allowed use. And that is why they're requesting essentially this text change. We have a loaded agenda, so I want to try to be as efficient as I can with the presentation and respect you all's time as well.
Thank you.
So with that, what you have here now, board members, is the proposed development, which is applicant is CB 2020 LLC. They're the owner of such said property. They're requesting a zoning text amendment to permit townhomes has a special exception use in the RM15 zoning district. So that means that if you decide to recommend to the council to amend the code to allow townhomes, they will only be allowed as a special exception, which means further review by the board in terms of the site plan, landscape plan, parking, et cetera. So this is not something that's going to be done automatically by right. You could approve this text change, which would apply citywide, and then the project that the applicant is going to come in and submit, you may have some issue with it, you may not, and same way with the staff. We're going to review it carefully, and look at either recommendation of a denial or approval with certain conditions that would reduce any adverse impact. Okay?
Okay.
Oh, by the way, yes, I'm only asking that you hold your questions until after the staff's presentation and the applicant. That's just a regular statement I've been making to you since I've been doing that. So I think when you hear the staff and the applicant, I think you'll be able to get a full picture. At least I hope you would. The property is vacant, as I said before. You see the parcel ID number, and the lot is approximately less than half an acre size. And of course, the zoning is RM15, and the land use is medium density, multiple family, up to 15 dwelling units an acre. As I said, staff reviewed this application as a special exception rather than proposing, as the applicant has said, as a permitted by use. The decision was made by the applicant as a special exception. Therefore, by limiting this amendment proposal to a special exception use addition of townhomes in section 31-197, there are no changes to the RM15 district's code functionality or subsequent implication without another city approval of a separate individual special exception use application for the specific property, as I said earlier. In addition, this application would enable reasonable consideration of compatible mixed housing types in a district that already permits the tax multifamily uses. As you may recall, the RM15 zoning district allows multifamily uses, and when I say RM15, it's the RM15 medium density residential zoning district. It's just that it's interesting that we never had townhomes included in the RM15 district. So this is by the applicant. He's looking to request that, and we're looking at presenting it before you. This is the most this is the most important part from the staff standpoint in terms of compliance with the comprehensive plan. Okay. Staff has determined that in terms of objective 1.1, public facilities availability, the city shall continue to ensure that all development and redevelopment is coordinated with the availability of facilities and services and is compatible with soil conditions and topography. Staff has determined that based upon what is being proposed and the fact that the request would indeed require a special exception, which will then the case will come back to you as a site plan review. Staff feels that this request is congruent or compliant with this objective. In addition, this request is compatible with the purpose of the housing element of the comprehensive plan. And you can see the purpose there is set up for you, for all to see. The purpose of the housing element is to identify existing projected deficits or surpluses in the supply of housing, to analyze housing trends and nature of any additional problems. 3, about the accomplishment of the necessary housing, whether through private sector efforts, nonprofit, public, private partnerships, or the public sector. And 4, to guide and coordinate all housing activities to increase the efficiency of the delivery of the housing delivery system. Number 1, I kind of cut short on, but I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to get at here. Is that by using the special assessment vehicle, this is a means to allow staff to present to the board and to the city a review of any future townhome projects that will come under the RM15 zoning district. So it's nothing, this is not an automatic type of situation. This hearing was properly noticed according to state law and city regulations. To my knowledge, we did not receive anything in writing prior to this meeting of support or opposition. I think the applicant is here. Yes, the applicant's representative is here to present and give any additional comment. And then there may be people in the audience who may want to give their testimony or their input as to the appropriateness or non-unappropriateness of this text change. So having said that, Mr. Chairman, one important thing, and that's the recommendation. Staff recommends that the Planning and Zoning Board recommend approval of this application to the City Council based upon the following findings of fact. The proposal is consistent with the intent and purpose of the RM15 zoning district, particularly in the exception definition. The proposal is consistent with the future land use and housing element of the comprehensive plan. Let me also just give a little brief. As you know, the future land use element is the multifamily zoning. I'm sorry, the multifamily land use, and the zoning is RM15. So staff finds that congruent and compatible with the text amendment request, since it is a multifamily type of request or use that would end up coming back before you anyway as a special exception. And then lastly, any future proposed townhome project will require a review and a recommendation of approval by the Planning and Zoning Board to the City Council. So as you can see, board members, the whole idea of this request is to make sure and ensure that there's no automatic approval for the townhome, for any townhome project within the RM15. It is to allow for a review by the Planning Board and the Town Council. And with that, staff will conclude its presentation and allow the applicant to make any presentation at this point in time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Just please identify yourself for the record and who you represent and what it is that you represent.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Kristen Hutton of HD Studio on behalf of the applicant, CB 2020. And so Chair Fernandez, board, thank you for your time. And also, I just want to thank staff as well. They've been really great about all my questions. And before my client wanted to even proceed forward, we had a really long discussion about whether or not, what he wanted to do with this property. And he just doesn't want to be a landlord. It's just not in he doesn't want to do it. And so the zoning right now is really limited to single family or multifamily. And, we'll talk about the differences in a minute, but, looking at your code and kind of going through it, on face value, this application, it holds up. It holds, the test of water. It makes sense. And I'll kind of go through that. So before we get started, let me go ahead okay. So the mechanics of the RM15 zoning district, let's just look at the broad purpose perspective. And it says this right in the code: the RM15 multifamily dwelling district is intended to provide for development of multifamily dwellings and for medium density of population. So, and that's out of the gate, that's the first paragraph in this code section. So when we look at that, then we say, okay, what does that really look like on the ground? And so this map just shows simply the existing districts of RM15. Now you can notice the applicant's property is, it's on Singer Island. It's not necessarily relevant to the application tonight for reasons that staff outlined. We would have to come before you with a subsequent application for this to even be employed. As it stands, if this gets approved tonight and then it gets approved to City Council, there's actually no change to the mechanics of your code without subsequent action from this board and City Council. Okay, so the mechanics of this application are, we have submitted a text amendment that would permit a townhouse use as a special exception, and staff did a great job of going through that, so I don't want to reiterate it to an exhausting extent, but I think that's just really important because, again, we are not proposing any change, physical change that would allow somebody to go to building permit tonight. That's just not, we wanted to allow staff as well as elected officials in this board to have the opportunity to look at it as a case-by-case basis. We just felt that was going to give everybody a significant level of comfort as opposed to just putting it as a permitted use. So as you can see currently, right now, this is just the kind of abbreviated use table, but it's permitted single family as well as multifamily. And again, the distinction there of multifamily is those units cannot be sold. They have to be, rental units. So it does require the property owner to be a landlord. Currently, the special exception uses are listed below apart from townhouses. That's why it says proposed. But so it's not just strictly a single family neighborhood. There's still opportunities for other people and other uses to come in and ask permission to do that. So that, for us, that also gave us a level of comfort in that this is not just the strict single-family focus by your code or your comp plan. There are opportunities for some kind of, mixture of uses. And so that also kind of helps support the argument of, okay, well, townhouses is just another example of a multifamily structure, and I'll get into more detail about that. So the ancillary mechanics are, with this proposal, we are just employing the existing standards that apply to townhome uses and form in your code. So the setbacks, the parking, the landscaping, it would be exactly what it is for a townhome use in your code already. We would just be applying it to, again, those case-by-case basis, which is very similar to a PUD. Now, in your code, you cannot have a PUD for land under 50 acres unless it's, I know you can ask for an exception. And we did, think about going that avenue, but really on the face of it, this just made more sense because it's not a far reach. This is consistent with multiple parts of the code and the comp plan, as well as just gives everybody a level of comfort with the special exception. So again, those standards would apply, but on a case-by-case basis. So you can almost think of it like a PUD application, because it would be on a case-by-case basis. It's not, just permitted by right. Again, important to note, maybe even critical to note, there is no unit increase. We are not asking for any kind of density increase. It's 15 units per acre, and that's exactly what it would stay under the guises of this application proposal. Okay, so we've gone over the what. Now let's look at the why. So when I started doing research into, preparing this application, it was interesting. I looked at the definition of, the city's definition in the code of multifamily versus a townhouse. And, there's there's some overlap, I would say significant overlap, specifically for multifamily. It simply says a dwelling unit, a multifamily dwelling unit means a building designed for 3 or more families. Well, that's absolutely meets the functional definition of a townhouse. I mean, on face value, it definitely does. However, it's implied, and I kind of outlined this in the justification, because your use tables differentiate between a townhouse and a multifamily, by default, we respect the list of uses, and we're going to say, okay, well, maybe that's what it says, but there's still a distinguishing factor there, and it's outlined in their code and their list of uses. Subsequently, why we're here before you tonight. And the townhouse is interesting also. It just kind of says, it's a dwelling unit attached by party walls on one or both sides, and it talks more about the form, which it is a little bit of a different form, and not to the extent of, I think, anything risky or harmful to a neighborhood. In fact, I personally think it's, a little bit more of a dynamic form. There's a lot of urban design, urban planning, dialogue, and theory about how, a differentiation of housing types adds, character and value to neighborhoods. So, again, it's not a risky use next to a multifamily house, next to a single family house. In fact, in part of your code, it refers to how multifamily buildings and townhomes, but specifically emphasizes townhomes, are used to buffer single family uses from more intense corridors. So it's almost like this middle ground, literally, with medium density housing. And again, just at the bottom, the primary difference here is multifamily building types. Those units are restricted to rentals. They cannot be sold. Whereas the units for the townhome building type, they're attached. They function the same way as a multifamily. They can just be sold and platted. So they come with a legal description. They also you own the land underneath that building, as well as any kind of front and rear yard. So just to kind of give you an overview, we took the zoning, we stripped out the commercial uses that were strictly commercial. We still have some downtown uses, but we included all the residential uses in the city. So the yellow is the single family, and then this, let me see if this has a little pointer. Oh, no, it doesn't have a pointer. Let's go back. Okay, so, but the lighter colored of the orange, kind of the bigger swaths of orange in the center of the city, as well as some parts that are smaller on Singer Island and next to the downtown with that new project along that Broadway corridor. Those are multifamily 15s. Those are, the district that that's subject to this application. And then, so if we look at just the multifamily zoning, so these are the zoning districts that permit townhomes as well as multifamily. So, there's a nice swath corridor along Broadway, obviously Singer Island, and then of course there's large swaths of the MF15 kind of in the center along the railroad tracks and just along Congress. Those are pretty big swaths. So then we want to look at, right now, today, this is what is permitted for townhomes. We have the downtown districts, but interestingly, RM20 permits townhomes by right, which is so fascinating to me because that's really designed for a much higher intensity use. So when I saw that, truthfully, it was just an administrative error that, RM15 did not permit it, if anything, at minimum by special exception. But so that gave us more of a level of comfort to make the request, since that, RM20, which is 20 units per acre, is permitting this use without any kind of additional ancillary review, which we found fascinating. But under this application, this would be the map that we would propose in some way, shape, or form. There is a method and an application process to apply to have townhomes. So obviously adding the RM15 district, which the applicant is subject to, as well as the other existing ones that are permitted by right. They're not required to have that subsequent level of review, in which we are proposing to give everybody hopefully a level of comfort. That concludes my application. We did find multiple sections of the housing code in the comp plan, as well as the purpose intent of RM15. We do feel it's consistent. We hope that caveat of the subsequent review through the special exception gives staff and everybody on the board a level of comfort to which you could hopefully approve this tonight. But I'm happy to answer questions.
Mr. Gallen, do you have any questions?
I have one. Are there any homes that's already there that's built next to where these empty lots are?
So there is a multifamily that's condominiumized next to it, and then there is another, I believe it's operating as an Airbnb, but I can't be sure.
And have they been notified of?
Oh, yes. We actually placed 4 signs instead of 2. We're only required to put 1 and 1 on each side because it's the 100 feet of frontage. But just to be sure that everybody knew that, we would like to have the opportunity to have a choice of rentals or ownership. And then we also sent out 56 mailers to every every property rather within 300 feet of the subject 2 properties.
Mr. Wilson, if I may state, to the west of the subject property in question, it's a quadplex, a 4-unit quadplex to the west of the site. And then just to the east of the site, it appears to be a single-family dwelling unit. Although it is RM15, it looks to be a single-family dwelling unit there. Yeah.
Okay.
Before I pass on, this is Cabana Road on Singer Island, correct?
It is, yes.
Isn't that the majority of that area there, single families?
No, actually, it's a mixture of multifamily and single family. It's definitely a mixture. It's all RM15 though, so the multifamily is permitted today.
What's the exact address of that empty lot?
There's 2 of them. It's 1154 and 1118.
I'll defer for the rest of my questions. Mr. Wiley?
No questions. And what was the response, I guess? Because not only you notified them, but was it any?
We did not receive any notification of any opposition. I asked staff prior if they had heard any, because I would have loved to address it in any way, and that did not occur.
I didn't receive anything in writing or phone calls. The group over to your left is with Thermo King, and there's a couple people here, but we haven't received anything formal ahead of time.
No questions at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Let me just ask some comment cards from our guests here, see if anybody has. Do we have any comment cards for the guests on this?
Mr. Silva, did you want to speak on item B, sir?
Can you come up to the podium and identify yourself? Thank you, sir. So you did have something to say after all.
My name's Robert Silver. I live at 1141 Cabana Street, right across the street from this proposal. First off, I'd like to find out what happened to A. I'm sorry, I couldn't really hear you sitting there.
We're moving that to the end because it's a language change that we're going to do. So we figure we'll tackle where the majority of the residents are here for, and we'll just do the minor language changes.
Okay,
And
because this minor language change will affect this property that we're talking about in duplexes.
Mr.
All the
Sermons?
townhouses, excuse me, what you're trying to talk about here right now. The language will change for these properties. So let me just enlighten you on the property a little. I live across the street from the lot. The lot has never been maintained. It's been a mess. I've been reporting this to the city for a long time. So it's great that we have some development going on. I do appreciate that. The lot has two streets to both sides. So I was wondering on the townhouse, my question is, are they going to have townhouses facing both sides of the street? And are you combining the acreage? Because you're saying it's 0.4 acres, so we're combining the properties because they're two separate parcels. So is there any proposal in here to combine the parcels?
I combined the two parcels from the standpoint of ownership, Board members. They are two separate by legal description. And whenever an application comes in, if they decide to build the townhomes on both parcels, then that would have to require a replat.
Okay, so at this point, we'll just to clarify so the audience
At
knows.
this point, we don't know what project.
Exactly. We don't have any project at the time, so all we're
Okay.
doing is approving. It's already a multi-family
Right,
RM15, so all we're going to do is you add townhomes to RM15.
okay. So let me give you a little insight on that for the gentleman. It's not an Airbnb, it is a rehab to the east of the property.
Right.
Okay? The property to the west, the fourplex, is a rehab. I have no problem with that, but I just want to clarify this. Because now if you put multifamilies there and you're going to be able to sell them, you're going to be selling them to people that may also go under the description of A for nursing homes, recovery community, recovery residence, special medical facility. I live in that street, and you should see the foot traffic alone going there right now for these properties, because there are a lot of people on the streets. So are these properties going to be sold to the medical facilities to have two bedrooms going to these townhouses? Are they going to be individual family owned? I think we're going on the premise that they're going to be family owned, but it seems to me the money may come in to add some more facilities to this property.
We won't know what they're going to propose for that until there's a plan. But
right.
remember, it still has to go through the approval process. Our team members first, then the planning and zoning board, then citizens like yourself saying, I agree or I do not agree.
I just wanted to follow up, and I appreciate the development, I really do. I lived in the property for over 25 years. I respect that, and I love the growth coming in this community. I just want to make sure it goes in the right direction for all of us, so we can all have a great community and strive. And
Well,
just to
the
clarify.
representative is here, sir, so I'm sure she's going to take your message back.
Thank
Or-
you.
or
I
she-
appreciate
They do
everybody's
not
time.
want a community outrage for the development, believe me.
Okay, but I will definitely keep following up with this. I appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you.
very
Yes,
much.
sir.
Ms. Davidson, if we have other speakers, make sure we don't forget Walter to set the timer, please, so everybody has an equal share.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have anyone else comment on the text amendment?
No, sir.
No more on the text amendment? So, Mr. Thompson, just basically to recap, RM15 already allows multifamily dwellings, yes?
That is correct, yes, sir.
So all we're doing is allowing townhomes into the area of RM15, allowing developers, property owners to build townhomes in areas designated as RM15.
Right, has a special exception.
as a special exception.
Yes, sir, which will require a review by staff and a public hearing by not only yourself, by yourselves, and a recommendation to city council, and then city council will also hold a hearing and make a determination. And believe you me, I made the, probably was an error, but to combine the two lots, one parcel like 0.20 and the other lot is like 0.209 for a total of 0.416. The maximum density, if you decide to recommend approval, is six townhomes, 6 units. The lot width of the two lots combined is something like over 100 feet lot width, which will comply with the RM15 zoning district. But again, you got setbacks, you got parking, you got landscaping, all those things will fall under the special exception review. So I'm real curious myself as to how, from a site plan standpoint, this will look, and from a staffing and a review standpoint. So we want this, Mr. Sermons, we want to allow something this to come to you and not be able to give it a thorough review.
Vice Chairman Wiley pointed out, if you bring up the picture of the lot with the vacant lot.
I don't know where that is, man.
Okay, that lot, you know how you have the green light designating the property? You're taking a quarter of the property next door. On that green, it covers that side of the property as well. So I'm sure it might have been just an oversight. Whoever did that, that's not their property.
I only use the property appraisers, records that to show what the two lots look like. And that's just to give you an idea in terms of the property.
I know, but if you use the property appraiser and that's correct, I would really review that again, because it's taking over the building next door, at least a quarter of it at the end cap.
Yeah, I can see that.
You saw that, correct? I just want to make
Yes,
sure
sir.
there's no issues with the plats, the property or anything else when it comes to you or this board.
Well,
because
one of the things that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I will say this real quick. One of the requirements that they submit a survey. Yeah, I see that. I see that west property line. That they will have to submit a survey of both lots, as part of the review for the special exception. And which at that time, we'll review that to make sure that that property line to the west does not encroach or impede upon the adjoining property. And the applicant's representative is here. I can have a conversation with her at some point.
Okay. Any other questions? It's all the questions from the public, no other questions from the board. Oh, Mr. Wiley.
Yes, sir, I'm sorry. I want to ask you one more question. I know you stated that the houses that was on the east and the west, they were, how you say, they were recovery?
The recovery, yes, on the east and the west.
And east and the west side. Now, you stated something about foot traffic coming through. And you said there was a lot of
Foot traffic on the streets, because there's ambrosia down there. There's multiple dwellings of rehabilitation.
Right.
Sure.
So in that area where this is coming, are you saying this is a positive foot traffic, a negative foot traffic? Because I know it could
The
be positive.
negativity of the foot traffic, because there's a lot of people considering in the rehabilitation side of it, they're putting 2+ into a 4-bedroom place. They're talking 8 beds, I
Right.
guess, to put it. So you can consider the traffic coming up and down that street, and it isn't always pretty.
Right.
And there's a lot of fire trucks, ambulance coming down there all the time because of ODs.
So you just in fear that this may bring more.
I just think if they're going to build the properties, which is great if it's going to expand out, and I understand people need treatment. My nephew's in treatment,
Right.
and I understand all that, and I'm all for it, but a little more controlling, because if you start building this, it seems like this is going to expand into more of that development to sell it. If you do 4 bedrooms, 8 more per townhouse. I can see it. It's there. So just please consider it when you're doing that, because if you're putting it under this label that we estimate it, again, nursing homes, recovery residents, that's going to be covered in that property when you do that on that RM15. So please be respectful on that. because I'm living across the street and I observe it. I know there's a couple residents here. So I'm in a duplex. I know another gentleman is in a single family. So the house is a beautiful area. And you see all the development going along the water there also. So please pardon my ignorance on this with the board, because I'm just learning and I'm just trying to share. So if I step out of line and say something wrong, I apologize.
We appreciate it. Mr. Sermons, do we have a point of contact that we can provide this gentleman so he can send in all the information he just provided so we can look at? I know we're limited on what we can do on these type of facilities because of what they are.
Correct.
However, if there's a negative impact on the community, that's a totally different story. And if they have a room in there and they're putting 8 people in one little itty bitty room, that's something that Mr. Sermon's
To
team.
say they usually put 2 beds per room.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
but so if you're doing 4 bedrooms,
Yeah.
I mean, the quad next door has 3 bedrooms. There's 6 to 8 people in each one of those condos. So, you take a drive by, take a look. You'd understand it a little more. The negative impact of the property, I think the townhouses would be great and a positive impact, but putting more facilities in there is really going to hurt the property, I think.
We need to know. Please keep us posted.
I will. Thank you. So please pardon my ignorance on that, but thank you for the time.
Absolutely not. Anything else?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
Staff has been taking notes on that, and as you know, we have brought the community residences ordinance and put it on the agenda for this evening. So based on the comments from the public, we have been making notes and some further staff suggestions on how we can move this ordinance back to city council based on those comments. So I just wanted to apprise the board of that.
Okay. If there's no further questions, need a motion to approve the text amendment as explained by the city personnel, read into the record by Ms. Davison, ZA 23-0006.
So move.
Second.
James,
Yes.
Anthony Brown,
Yes.
William Wiley,
Yes.
Frank Fernandez.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Now we're moving on to C.
Item 7C, a resolution of the City Council of the City of River Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, approving a replat by Thermo King of the Southeast Palm Beach to replat PA 230005 plus minus 3.44 acres of contiguous lots of record into a single parcel of property totaling approximately plus minus 3.44 acres plus minus 149,846.4 square feet of land area located at 6870 and 6900 North Military Trail, property control numbers PCN 5642423622000010 and 5642423600001050, and providing for an effective date and for other purposes.
Mr. Sarmans, I believe you were going to read each one, C, D, E, and F, and your team was going to speak on all of them at the same time. Am I correct?
The staff recommendation is that we do one presentation that contains all of them, but before the board votes, that we do each one individually and each one be read separately.
Perfect.
And for this item, Principal Planner Curtis Thompson will be making the presentation.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, board members. Where's James? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Chairman and board members. All right, so this is a four-part request, of which I think Mrs. Davison did read that out to the board. So this is the applicant is requesting approval. Let me just go back. The applicant is requesting approval of a land use amendment, a rezoning and site plan and plat approval to allow for an addition to their existing, I said auto service operation, but they're actually, they're doing auto service only to the extent that they work on the air conditioning and the refrigeration aspect of their clients. Okay. Right now, by our code, we classify it as a motor vehicle service, but they don't actually do auto repair. What they do is the refrigeration aspect, and the applicant and their service and their subject matter experts will give more definition to that. The size of the property is 3.41 acres. The zoning is general commercial with a future land use of commercial. And this, what you have there is a reduced version of the whole site plan. What I found interesting, Mr. Chairman and board members, is this area here is where the parking lot, the additional parking area and service area is going to be. They're using a type of material that is permeable that allows for drainage to occur in this area where the additional work will be done. They're going to look at taking both these lots and turn them into one single parcel of property. The address here is 6870 North Military, and the address here is 6900 North Military, and they're proposing to combine these. If I may, to the north here, this is the CXX Railroad area. That is zone industrial. To the east here is a warehouse use, which is also zone industrial. To the west is North Military Trail, and then what you have over here is industrial. You also have here to the southwest corner is Goodwill store, which is in the general commercial zoning district. And then to the south here is general commercial. But what you notice, most and if all the uses around this such a property are automotive related, either cars, trucks, what have you. It's just that the applicant has a special type of, it's a specialty in that, yes, they have motor vehicles, but they tailor their activity to doing for Cheney Brothers, creating refrigeration units for them to go ahead and transport foods, items, and so forth. Like I said, the applicant will give more detail to that. This is a copy of their landscape plan, which appears to have quite a lot of landscaping, which of course, I for one like a lot of landscaping, and the applicant is proposing to do that. We will make sure if you decide to make a recommendation of approval that they meet 31-609 in the zoning code. This is a copy of the proposed site details that shows the circulation, on-site traffic circulation. One of the things when I spoke with the applicant, what they talked about the reduction of traffic with this new proposed site plan. And they'll be, as I said, give you more information. And I think I found it interesting when they began to talk about what they propose to do. Staff reviewed the application according to section 3157, which is the site plan section. Staff has ascertained that if proposed new development is in conformity with the comprehensive plan, Staff has determined that it is not detrimental to the neighboring land use, that an efficient pedestrian vehicular system, including the property, means of ingress and egress to the street is provided for, and that the proposed project shall be a viable addition to the community. The community being pretty much, as I said, industrial related, and the nearest residential area is like hundreds of feet from this subject property. What I did notice, Mr. Chairman and board members, is that there's a portion to the northeast which is not within the bounds of the city. It's a trailer park area. Well, it's a mobile home park area. Mr. Wiley understands what I'm talking about. But it's not within the city of Riviera Beach. So, so from that standpoint, we have to look at it from the standpoint of properties that is within the city. Plus, that area is there's like 6 foot high walls around that area. And so there's a screening mechanism that already exists that screens the mobile home park from the rest of the city of those industrial uses. Next, in terms of the future land use element 1.81, general industrial includes both the limited industrial district, light manufacturing, automotive uses, construction, wholesale, etc., to the general districts, which include heavier manufacturing, petroleum, etc. The applicant is not proposing to do the heavier manufacturing aspects. The automotive use, they are, but it's not your typical, what you would think of as automotive, as I said, and they will shed more light on that. It's more of the refrigeration aspects as it relates to their clients' needs and demands. Staff has determined that the proposed use, the land use rezoning, site plan, and the replat is compatible with this objective. In addition, I said that the applicant is proposing the land use amendment and rezoning to industrial general. And as I said earlier, it's compatible with the properties north, east, and west of their subject property. And I also say, in addition, in terms of the replatting of the 2 parcels into a single parcel, allows for additional servicing and parking for their client. I said their trucks, but it's actually for their clients' vehicles, which will improve on-site circulation for a more cohesive site plan. As again, I said, the applicant will expound upon that. So this hearing was properly noticed, and staff has not received any input, negative or positive, either by phone or by email. So I wanted to make that known to the board as well. And as I go through, lastly, and more importantly, the staff is recommending that the Planning and Zoning Board approve this application to the City Council based upon the following findings of fact: that the proposal is consistent with the intent of the site plan criteria, that the proposal will be consistent with the future land use element of the comp plan, and more specifically 1.8.1, particularly since the surrounding uses you saw are industrial or I would say light industrial in nature, and that the site plan conditions of approval will eliminate any adverse impact. And so with that, board members, I want to conclude staff's presentation. The applicant and his representatives are here, and I think they will put more detail, because the attempt here was to give you an overview of the facts, and then the applicant, along with their representatives, will give you, if you pardon my phrase, put more meat on the bone, so to speak, and from a factual standpoint. And so,
Mr. Thompson, real quick, your staff presentation covered C through F, am I correct?
That is.
Okay,
thank
we
you,
only
thank
read
you,
into the record C.
Thank you.
So can we read D, E, and F into the record,
Thank
and
you.
then we'll have the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes.
Thank you.
I wanted to be, like I said, in terms of time, I want to be efficient with the time. So I wanted to go through all 4 aspects: the land use, the rezoning, the site plan, and the replat. I put them all together into one package for this presentation.
Perfect. Can we read into the record then, the D, E, and F?
Mr. Chair, if I
Yes.
may, can I respectfully request that we read each item and then have the board vote on each item instead of reading all of the items and then having a vote? We may,
Change the rules on us.
we may, I think it would just be better for clarity of the record.
Okay, so let's just tackle C. We'll have the applicant come up and do C only.
Okay.
We'll vote on C. After the vote, has questions, and then we'll do D separate, E and F. Is that okay?
Mr. Chair, you can certainly do it that way. Another option might be to have the applicant come up and have the board ask questions as to all matters. But when it comes time to vote, if you just read the item and
Perfect.
vote, then read the next item and vote.
Perfect.
Yeah, I agree
Then
with
we'll have the
counsel.
applicant cover C through F, their entire request.
Right. And then when you come down to vote, you vote on each item separately, but you're going to hear the applicant present
Yeah, and then
this
we'll read,
entire
yep,
case.
perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening. I want to wake everybody up here. This is a real pleasure to be here tonight. I'm really happy to be here for many reasons. The staff and the city of Riviera Beach have been terrific to deal with, every single one of you. So I just want to say thanks very much. I'm going to have Tyler, who's on my team. I'm Rebecca Miller, president of MPLD Consulting, and I'm the agent on this project. And I'm going to have him kind of take us through some of our kind of just summation of the scope of our project. But I do want to just start us out with, this is a great story. You have an existing company that's been here for 18 years that employ a lot of people here with a fantastic median income and job creator. They support city departments. I don't know if you know that, but Thermo King USA and Thermo King of the Southeast actually supply products to the fire divisions here, to the ambulance services, to the hospitals. They contain everywhere where you have a vehicle and you have a refrigeration system. Thermo King is that refrigeration system. They're the largest refrigeration system in the world. And the fact that you have them here in Riviera Beach is a fantastic addition to our community here. And so they want to grow. So growth is a beautiful thing. Luckily, we're here before you today without asking for any concessions, variances, any sort of side deals. This is a straightforward application. We need more space to park vehicles. And we were here for many, many years, 18 years. The site's been operating under its current use and stature since the 70s. However, this application brought to light the fact that we needed to go from a non-conforming use into a conforming use. And that's why all these applications are in front of you for what is essentially a parking lot. We own the property just adjacent to that was purchased several years ago with the idea of expanding a parking lot. Right now, we have trucks that go in and come out, park, get serviced, and then have to leave the same day because we are unable to store their systems and able to work on them the next day. So they have to leave and come back. This will allow us to service those refrigeration systems in a continuous manner, allowing more jobs to be serviced because our site actually also has a portico share that's attached to our existing building right now that will give working crews an opportunity to work in the shade and electricity that will allow more generations of trucks to flow through in the sense of being repaired. So I'm going to let Tyler go through everything. I have Ed Corey, who is the CEO of Thermo King of the Southeast here. This is important to us. This is important to show that we really mean business here and we're excited to be here. I'm going to bring him up last so that you can ask any questions of him. And I'm sure he's going to want to say a few words. I also have Keith Engineering here. They're our civil engineers. So if you have any technical questions, Jorge will be happy to answer anything He's sitting here as well. So Tyler, go ahead, start us out.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. My name is Tyler Schultz. I'm a project administrator on Rebecca's team. I'm presenting tonight on behalf of the applicant, Thermo King of the Southeast. Want to take you through this, the proposed parking lot expansion. I think as it shows up on your agenda, this is C, D, E, and F. We'll go into site plan, the plat, rezoning, and land use. So the site plan here, and I pulled up, some of the key items to the right there. One of the driving aims of this expansion is to improve site circulation by increasing site storage area by almost 50%. As Kurt touched upon, the proposed parking lot will feature true grade pavers there. This is a great option, 100% water permeability. It's a far more sustainable material than a traditional concrete, and is going to provide some heat reductions from the teams on site. And in addition, that proposed portico share will supply the mechanical teams with a covering to be able to work on more chunks concurrently. And I'll iterate this now, and we'll come back to it at a later time. But this is only a parking increase. There's no anticipated increase in traffic. So we move on to the plat, and to the right there, you see the existing parcels as they stand today. 6900 North Military Trail and the existing site at 6870. If you see in the graphic there, it will change over to what the proposal will look like, and that unified site plan allows for the expansion of parking. This is this is the space that will provide that increased operational facility that Thermo King seeks. And the request here is to obviously combine 6900, that wooded grass area with the standing site at 6870. So the current zoning district as it stands is general commercial, which it has been since Thermo King purchased the site in 1984. And the goal here is to change to general industrial. This allows Thermo King to gain zoning applicable to use rather than existing non-conforming. We drew up a little table just to show what's going on to the north, south, east, and west. I know Kurt touched on this as well. The new zoning designation conforms with what's going on all sides, right? It fits in refrigeration transport, fits in nicely with the neighbors. There's transportation, there's commercial and construction there. This is what's needed, and this will allow again Thermo King to be able to gain that applicable use. Want to touch on landscape as well. This is done by Carla Bloom at Native Bloom. The new landscape proposed more heavily along Military Trail. Have a portfolio there of what Carla sent over. Some of the shrubs, palms, and trees to be featured. And this pertains, of course, to the area that is currently standing as that 6900 parcel. There's a lot of invasive exotics there removed, and where possible, those existing native vegetation will remain on site, be relocated, and then primarily native trees, palms, shrubs, like you see there on this slide, will be brought in to complement what's already there. Now, circling back to traffic, Keith Engineering was retained by Thermo King to put together a traffic statement for this. The brass tacks here is that the proposed improvements will not generate any new trips. You see there that the daily trips generated, totals 160, less than 21 peak hour trips. This is, provided to us and to give us insight that, this is again like a parking lot expansion. It's not to bring intensity to the roadways. It's to help with the overflow. Being a good neighbor, obviously, is a top consideration for Thermo King of the Southeast here in Riviera Beach. I want to just touch on kind of these notes that Rebecca had brought up as well. This is the community reach and impact that Thermo King brings. It's the largest transport refrigeration company in the world. It's growing its customer base both here locally and beyond. To put that into figures, from 2005, the business has grown from less than 1 million in annual revenue to almost 4 million in Riviera Beach alone. This type of expansion will result in a significant increase for both business and investment in Riviera Beach. This brings a great positive impact to retail, to restaurants, to hotels, all those businesses that drivers will need as they remain local during repairs. And it's important to note that as critical stakeholders such as Cheney Brothers continue to grow their business in Riviera Beach, the need for additional support from Thermo King is critical here. Want to show some figures next that Ed and his team sent over. This is some pretty compelling data. These projections show over the next 5 years. Want to begin here with the average median salary, standing as $72,000 here in 2023, and then projected to grow over 40% to 2028, over $100,000. And how that looks, on a team level with the total payroll, quite compelling. There's a projected increase of over 4 times over the next 5 years to quadruple to over 2.2 million for total payroll by 2028. It's important to note that this will have a lot of positive byproducts. You'll see additional jobs, increased employee income, and it delivers additional sales tax revenue for Riviera Beach, here locally and on a state level. Again, to show off some more of the projections composed for the presentation this evening, this shows 5-year growth of what that looks like both on a county level and the aggregate data pulled for the state of Florida as a whole. Set to grow, over 60% in Palm Beach County and over 150% in the state of Florida. All those figures that I showed are entirely dependent upon the approval of this project. That's giving, Thermo King of the Southeast the capacity to be able to turn the increased revenue. So a thank you to the board and staff for your time and consideration. I think at this time I want to bring up Ed to be able to introduce himself.
Good evening. My name is Ed Corey, CEO of Thermo King of the Southeast. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, speak to you all tonight. And as Rebecca said, the way you all have worked with us has just been really exciting and very much appreciated. We are a very, very proud member of the Riviera Beach business community. And we look forward to growing in this area. Thermo King, as Rebecca said, is the largest transport, meaning truck, rail, ship, company in the world. My partner and I bought this business in 2005, and as that showed there, it was a little less than $1 million worth of revenue, and their figures are a little light. We think it's a little more than 4 million are coming out of Riviera Beach right now. And but as a company, we own 7 of these dealerships in Florida and Georgia, and as an entire company, we started in 2005. It's about a $3 million company, and today at the end of this year, we'll close out as about a $42 million company. We started with 16 employees in Riviera Beach and Fort Pierce combined. We're just a little over 100 now. We want to bring that type growth to Riviera Beach without creating any traffic issues. We're hugely conscious of environmental sustainability, hence the True Grid. It's a little more expensive, but it is certainly less impactful on the environment than concrete. So we are conscious of those kinds of things. Noise abatement. Thermo King as a corporation and their manufacturing process have created some very quiet units. They have to operate in places like New York City and places that have really strict noise ordinances. So you don't have a lot of noise out of these units. But the excitement that I have is being able to grow in Riviera Beach. This was our first location that we bought back. This location actually became a Thermo King dealer in the early 70s, 71, 72. My partner and I bought it in 2005, and we added the other 6 in Orlando and Tallahassee and Southern Georgia. But Riviera Beach is a bit of a soft spot in my heart. That's because it's the first place we had. It's where I started. Left a 26-year career with Ryder Truck Rental and Leasing to put my house on the bank note to start this business down here. And it's exciting to me to see it and to be a part of Riviera Beach. Our largest customer here in town is Cheney Brothers, but we also have Cisco Foods and most any food related. About 65% of our business is food related, either restaurant supply or public grocery supply, Publix, Winn-Dixie. The other 35%, or probably 30 of the last 35, is pharmaceutical. We don't haul it. Our customers haul medicine. So anything that's temperature controlled or temperature sensitive, Thermo King pretty much touches. And to watch, like the COVID vaccine rollout that we were a part of, and making sure that vaccine was, the integrity of that vaccine was the way we all would want it to be, was gratifying, frankly. And to watch Cheney Brothers, I was saying to someone, when we first bought this business in 2005, Cheney Brothers had 240 trailers. Today they have just almost 1,500. And we support them heavily in Riviera Beach. So I don't want to belabor this. I could talk to you about this all night because I get really excited about it. And but again, I thank you all for your time. I thank you for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for what you do for our community. It's an important spot in my heart, Riviera Beach, and I appreciate you all protecting the integrity of the building and the development that goes on here. So thank you very much.
Well, first of all, we thank you for bringing jobs to Riviera Beach, your businesses. We really appreciate it.
Well,
Thank
you're
you.
certainly welcome. Thank you for saying that. We're going to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to have questions for Mr. Thompson and your group, but let's start with, do you have something to say, ma'am?
No, I was just waiting to see if you had any questions.
Yes. Mr. Gallen, do you have any questions?
I have one. It will probably be for staff. Who owns the property adjacent to the railroad tracks next to where they're gonna be putting this parking lot?
Well, I can tell you, looking at the appropriation maps, just north of the applicant's property, that is the CSX.
It is CSX. It's right up against the railroad tracks.
Yeah. The question that I have is, if you're gonna be putting new shrubberies on that side, will the rest of that stuff be cleaned up? If you're gonna have nice trees and everything, is the rest of that gonna be cleaned up by the railroad or by whom?
Well,
or-
certainly, I think one thing that's happened since Thermo King bought that adjacent lot is when they first, prior to buying that, it was a fairly intense encampment of homeless folks living there. And what comes with that, of course, is you have a lot of garbage and things like that. And so much has been done already to clean that element up on that site. And we cleared out all the, the kind of the invasive stuff at the ground level, and have maintained a nice and clear and clean site. So because of that, I think the vagrancy of the adjacent CSX areas, because you're not going to be supporting a large community of folks who are squatting essentially, I think that will help keep those areas clean. But I know that Thermo King wants a clean area, and certainly we can make every effort to just clean along our fence line and everything. So I think that, when you make something a lot more attractive and certainly more visible, one thing right now is you have a very, very heavy green area with very little visibility into the site. This will actually open up that visibility. And so when you have activity and visibility, away goes some of the vagrancy issues that you will see in untended areas.
Well, that's all I have. I don't have any problems with this addition. Just as the chair said, we're happy that you all are here and moving
Thank you.
this city forward.
Mr. Wow.
Just for clarification, I guess, for people at home and just so we get a common understanding, the area here that I'm looking at, basically what you just want to do is, and I do understand what the vagrancy issue was, because I know we had some issues with that in that area. You just basically want to take some of the area there and then be able to utilize it for your company. But where the railroad tracks are, and I just want clarification on this part here, where the railroad tracks are you going to leave, I guess, some shrubbery there? Are you going to take that all away and give clear visibility from Martin Luther King Boulevard and Military Trail?
Right. We actually do have we're required to put in a landscape buffer.
Okay.
So there is still a landscape buffer, but, it's going to look like a cleaned up, professional looking site with much activity on it, and all the requirements will be met for landscape buffering. So I think it's a 6-foot buffer along that property line, and it will be a 6-foot high chain link fence. So we will have a fence, we will have buffering. However, it's still going to be a nice looking, you're still going to be able to see through it, because for security purposes, you can't let your shrubberies get too high.
Right.
And so I think it's going to be very conducive to having visibility to both the CSX areas and the street.
And I think that's actually a good idea for that area. So yes, yeah.
Right.
I was thinking this.
Yeah, right now it's really jungly. And so I think that lends itself to opportunity. And so this is really going to, I think site activation is probably the biggest thing to fight vagrancy. And when you activate an entire site like this site will be activated, I think you're going to find a natural fallout of those kinds of activities. And obviously people are going to be looking through our site and want to make sure that there's not garbage piled up on the other side and whatnot. So I think it's a win-win.
Better utilization of land also. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown?
Yes, in the northwest corner,
Yes, sir.
I see a pump station and a little building there.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
A pump station and a building.
Yep.
Who owns that? And what is it?
Okay, there's a little building there, and that is actually an AT&T easement. And so they actually have a small building there that was, when we purchased the property, it was enshrined essentially in the property. And so they actually have an active, like there's actually machinery in there humming. So it's equipment for, is it AT&T or is it Comcast? AT&T. And so they are actually running, it's serving as some sort of a distribution center for some of its lines. And so we have an easement that kind of goes up the side of our property, and that whole section is going to be fenced off and contained. So they will have the ability to access their site through our parking lot. However, it's not going to be tied into where our parking is going to be. We have a separation between the two.
Yeah, I see that. But my next question is,
I'm sorry? Correct. Yeah, we have a maintenance agreement also with AT&T.
so there is an easement, but I don't see it on the plat,
Yes,
is my question.
yes,
It is not on the plat?
it is on the plat.
No, not,
Well, our plat is a boundary plat, and it includes, if we go back to, do
the
you have the plat?
pump station itself is not on the plat.
Do we have the plat?
You have a copy of the plat, Mr. Brown?
Yes.
We have a copy of the plat here if you need it.
Yeah, the actual plat document does indicate the easement, and actually, we actually spent quite a bit of time with staff going back and forth over the locate of that easement, and so the legal descriptions are all included in the plat. So I'm not sure which plat document you're looking at.
I'm not sure either, but I can only, in trying to answer your question, sir, the plat will go through a review process with.
I understand, sir.
Excuse me, sir?
I understand that part.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that I notice it goes up to the adjoining parcel to the north,
Yes,
but it stops right at the boundary of that parcel.
correct.
And the pump station goes beyond the parcel.
That is not on our property. The pump station?
Uh-huh. Is it,
Why don't we have, Jorge, you want to come up here? That's why he's here. He's not here just to look handsome. Technical questions, we'll let the guy answer. There you go.
Hi, good night. My name is Jorge Valle from Keith and Associate. I'm one of the senior associate for the firm. There is an easement, like you were saying, that goes north for AT&T and Verse South. That's our book on page 3871 and page 1584. So there's an existing easement that goes up to that northwest
yes.
property.
Well, according to this drawing that I have, it stops at the south boundary of that parcel. The easement doesn't pass the south boundary of the parcel.
Ron, would it be easier if Mr. Valle comes up to you and you can show him what you have?
Yes.
But it doesn't, here, it doesn't pass here.
This is the plot, and this is the boundary survey. Yeah, so the easement is right here. This is
Yes, it goes up and it stops here.
Yeah.
This is line right here.
Oh, no,
This is this line here. Look. Right here. Look. This is this line here.
Mr. Ron, if there's an issue, we can have him review it. And if any approvals will be subject to.
To a
Yes.
condition.
I'll
Yes,
pass
sir.
on, yeah, I'll pass the information on to staff and they can make sure it gets done properly.
Yes, staff can do that.
Good?
And I also have a few other comments also. So.
Well, now that Mr. Valle is looking at it, he knows exactly what needs to be done, and you can address it.
Yeah, I know. No, this is going to be here. Here. Oh, there's nothing there, it's blank.
Okay.
All right.
This is what the scene.
The surveyor.
Yes.
So
we have
here.
this
Yep.
easement.
It doesn't pass over here. There's nothing over here, it's blank. So,
This is the survey.
yeah, this is surveying, so it exists right here, but nothing here.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
respectfully, I want to make sure that we're observing all sunshine laws. I would prefer not to have board members gathered in a group with the applicant.
I agree with you, however, they're just discussing the plat that needs to be fixed with the city, Mr. Thompson. So,
I
whatever.
understand, but their discussions need to be heard and picked up on the record.
Mr. Valle, if you already have what needs to be addressed with Mr. Thompson, can you please address it? And then it'll be, our vote will be subject to those amendments. So if you want to, you want us to generalize the conversation they had, please, for the record?
Yes, sir, please, and
That's what I
thank
figured.
you.
If you could, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Mr. Thompson, you were present. For the record,
Yes, sir.
the meeting that you had reviewing with Mr. Board Member Brown, could you just place on the record what was discussed and what you were looking at?
Okay, yeah, Mr. Brown, if you could, I'd like to talk with you offline or no, I'm sorry. Put on the record what you and the gentleman were talking about, so it's recorded. Okay, we need
I
to
will
make
put it on the
sure it's
record,
recorded.
but just to clarify things, the survey shows a pump station and a building on the north side of that adjoining adjoining parcel, sorry, next to the tracks. And the plat doesn't show that. So that's my issue.
Right.
So there's a difference between the survey and the plat.
They don't match.
That's what was discussed. different, and then it was agreed that Mr. Valle and his team, along with the city, will review the survey and the plat and get to the bottom of this, and that will be the amendment to what we're voting on tonight. So until they fix, we'll vote,
I
but
think we.
subject to
A condition, we can make that some sort of a
condition that
condition.
Yes.
the difference between the plat and the survey is taken care of.
Yes, staff
English?
will ensure that that is taken care of if that is the condition of the board upon voting.
Okay, any more questions?
So is that there?
Yeah, that,
Is that there?
Thank you. And
So
I
if-
think we need to just verify that the latest documents are there as well, just to make sure, because we went back and forth quite a bit at the end with corrections and stuff with the
yes, so
plat.
yes, so it's the plat and a few other modifications that need to be done. That's what we're voting on.
Right. So you would condition us to just submit the final plat to match the survey.
That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
Any other questions for you?
No, that's it.
Okay, I just have a few. What's it, on the further record, Mr. Thompson, the difference between commercial and industrial? And then for the other team, why do they need industrial in lieu of what they have now?
Well, first of all, in the general commercial zoning district, what they're proposed to do with this was not allowed in that zoning district, in the general
Parking lot?
commercial.
They're adding a parking lot. You mean to tell me commercial does not allow a
No,
parking lot?
it's the use itself, not so much the parking lot, but what they're doing there, which is the refrigeration aspect of it.
Okay, they're doing refrigeration now.
Right.
So I'm kind of confused. I'm talking about the city ordinance require commercial and industrial, the difference from a city ordinance perspective.
Okay, let me try it a different way here. I want to pull up the zoning code. Okay, well, basically, let me just tell you. When you look at a general commercial zoning district, you're looking at warehousing, light warehousing, and similar types of commercial uses from supermarket to food packing. In an industrial district, you're talking about more heavy duty, quote unquote, types of things like automotive repair, trucks, and in this instance, refrigeration use. As I said, this is a unique type of use. It's not just a trucking company. What they're doing is that they prepare a vehicle for the transportation of food items or foodstuffs. And that is done with the equipment, with for lack of a better word, a refrigeration unit that then freezes has the container that allows for refrigeration of food items. In addition, she'll correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think I can help. I think I can help tremendously
Already
here.
doing that there.
Yeah,
So
I know
why
what.
do you need to go from
Yeah.
commercial to industrial?
They're
So
expanding.
what
It's an
was-
expansion.
It
They're
was,
expanding
so we
their
were
use.
allowed, why is it non-conforming is, I think is what your question is. The reason it's non-conforming is that back in the day when they went in and got their occupational license, this is prior to Ed owning the business, they signed, we get an occupational license or for any time you go in that would then dictate use, right? And appropriate use. They got the use at the time as automobile repair. And when we came through on our application, which is an allowed use in general commercial, when we came through with our application to expand, and in our pre-application meetings, when we explained that we actually don't service vehicles, we actually are changing out AC systems, or we're changing out refrigeration systems. The staff mentioned that that was not allowed under the general commercial, and we were a non-conforming use, and we could remain that way as long as we didn't make any changes to the site. Because we're making a change to the site, and it is a major site plan because of the impact to our site, that required a change in use also to be added to the application.
Excellent. Now I understand.
Thank you.
Okay. Another thing on the landscaping, I know sometimes developers cut corners they have these beautiful pictures of landscaping there. but they plant a 1 gallon tree, it'll take 30 years to mature to the level we saw here.
Right.
What kind of, are you going to avoid that, or what are you going to plant?
Well, the code is pretty dictatorial as far as the size of plants that are now planted. And I know back in the day, they could plant a 1 foot and hope by the end of construction at 6 feet. I know that because this is a big site work project, we're not going to be planning, that's not going to be our philosophy, plant a berm and hope it grows up. We're going to be coming in and putting in the landscape in the end, and it will be impactful and lovely.
Excellent.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I would also want to add to that upon final inspection by city staff, we would go out and look at the size of the vegetation installed and ensure that it meets the minimum dimensions required by the code. So they would not be able to get a certificate of completion for this work until staff has verified that the trees are of a mature enough size that they should, survive the winters, so to speak. So that is a part of the staff process to verify that.
And the landscape code requires, so on our landscape planting plan, we can't just put in, 15 2-foot buckets. All the root balls have to be a certain size and the heights have to be a certain size. And we've actually gone above code minimum. So we hope to make this an attractive site. And so we want to show off. It'll be pretty.
Well, most of the developers that came here, they have the same thing. They go above the code, because if you compare the pictures on those fully grown trees that your landscaper provided, you're not going to match that. Okay, let's be realistic. But at least let's not plant 1 gallon or 2 gallon and wait for 15 years before it grows. That's all I'm asking.
We hear you.
Okay. If there's nothing further from the board, let's go on C. C was read into the record by Ms. Davidson, also covered by Mr. Thompson and Thermo King representatives. It is to replat PA 230005. Do I have a motion?
So move. Second.
With corrections.
Well, with the obviously the conditions that we discussed with the plat and the survey.
Right, to reconcile the differences between the survey and the plat, to make sure that they both line up together congruently.
That is correct. So the way we're approving it is the replat as read into the record with the conditions referenced by Mr. Thompson,
Yes, sir.
as brought up by Mr. Brown.
That word reconcile is key here, is to make sure the survey and the plat both
Oh, it's
combine.
gotta, yeah, they gotta agree. They gotta be the same.
Oh, and thank you.
Okay.
And I think they are. I think we have the wrong document here.
We have a motion. We already passed 1 and 2. We just need to vote.
Okay. Anthony Brown,
Yes.
James Gallen,
Yes.
William Wiley,
Yes.
Frank Fernandez.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Ms. Davis, would you be so kind as to read D into the record?
Yes, sir. Item 7D, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of River Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, approving a small-scale future land use map amendment to the City of River Beach Comprehensive Plan, approving an application LU 230003 from Thermo King of the Southeast Palm Beach, located at 6870 and 6900 North Military Trail. Property control numbers 56424236, 22000010, and 56424236, 00001050 on approximately plus minus 3.44 acres, plus minus 149,846.4 square feet, requesting a land use designation from commercial to a land use designation of industrial, and providing an effective date and for other purposes.
Do we have a motion to accept approving an application LU 23-0003 as read into the record by Ms. Davidson, and again explained by Mr. Thompson and the Thermo King representatives?
So move. Second.
Mr. Chair, before we vote, can we clarify as to each item whether we received any any cards from speakers or potential speakers?
Ms. Davidson, I didn't see any staff speakers or anything on these items, and I believe Mr. Thompson on the record put in there were no comments received. Am I correct, Mr. Thompson?
Sir, that is correct.
Okay, so again, no comments were received by the team per Mr. Thompson, and I do not believe you have any
No public comment cards.
no public comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anthony Brown,
Yes.
James Gallen,
Yes.
William Wiley,
Yes.
Frank Fernandez.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Thank you. Ms. Davidson, read E into the record, please.
Item 7E, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of River Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, approving an application ZA-23-004 from Thermo King of the Southeast Palm Beach, requesting a zoning map amendment from a commercial general zoning district designation to an industrial general zoning district designation located at 6870 and 6900 North Military Trail. Property control numbers 564242 3622 000 0010 and 564242 3600 0001050, and providing for an effective date and for other purposes.
Could I have a motion to approve application ZA 23-0004, read into the record by Ms. Davidson, further explained by Mr. Thompson and the Thermo King team?
So move.
Second.
Anthony Brown,
Yes.
James Gallen,
Yes.
William Wiley,
Yes.
Frank Fernandez.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Ms. Davidson, would you please read into the record F?
Item 7F, a resolution of the City Council of the City of River Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, approving a site plan SP-23-0013, a site plan request from Thermo King of the Southeast Palm Beach for a new parking area in a proposed port cochere. Am I saying that right?
Pretty close, portico share.
Local share on approximately plus minus 3.44 acres of land, plus minus 149,846.4 square feet, generally located at 6870 and 6900 North Military Trail. Property control numbers 564242 3622 000 0010 and 564242 3600 0001050, providing for conditions of approval, providing for an effective date, and for other purposes.
And would the port cochere include a barista and a,
I wish. We'll still give you coffee if you come by.
thank you, ma'am. Do I have a motion to approve site plan SP 23-0013 as read into the record by Ms. Davidson, explained by Mr. Thompson and the Thermo King representatives?
So move.
Second.
Anthony Brown,
Yes.
James Gallen,
Yes.
William Wiley,
Yes.
Frank Fernandez.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you again.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you. It's a pleasure having you here. Thank you so much. Thank you. You're welcome, sir. Thank you very much for your help. Thank you. Thank you so much. Do you have a card on you? Yeah.
Okay.
Very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you
so much.
Appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
That's my man. He brought the truck in my house. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you for helping him out. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, buddy.
Mr. Thompson, we're now on G. Ms. Davidson, would you read G into the record?
Item 7G, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, creating City Code of Ordinance, Chapter 32, Art in Public Places, providing for purpose, conflicts, severability, codification, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you.
All right, good evening, Mr. Chair. For the record, Clarence Sermons, Director of Development Services for the City of Riviera Beach. The item that I am about to present to you, you have seen before. Since the last time we have discussed art in public places with this board, staff has prepared it for our city council and began conversations with those members. In having those initial conversations and receiving direction from our elected body, we've made some changes to the ordinance and some changes that we believe are significant enough that this needs to be reheard by the Planning and Zoning Board to make sure, per the ordinances of the city, that the Planning and Zoning Board has reviewed any items before going to City Council. So what I'll do is try to move swiftly through some components of art in public places that you've heard already and try to highlight the changes that have taken place since the last time you voted on this item. And if it will please the board, if there are no questions on that introduction, I'll go ahead and get into it. All right.
Go ahead, all yours.
All right, thank you very much. Again, we have essentially expanded the text and the amount of detail in this ordinance. The intent and purpose of this chapter to further the commitment of the city to the aesthetic, economic, cultural, and historical enrichment of the community through the creation of works of art. So residents and visitors to the city of Riviera Beach are afforded an opportunity to benefit from the latent and direct impact art has on a community. The requirements of this chapter shall be construed to promote the aesthetic values of the entire community and to encourage the acquirement, preservation, and protection of works of art. This ordinance has several actions that it accomplishes if and when approved. One, establishes definitions. It clarifies who is subject to the new ordinance. It creates the Public Art Advisory Board, establishes powers and duties and functions of the advisory board, establishes the criteria for art, creates the public art fee, establishes the public art fund, creates the requirements for program participants, creates provisions for unsolicited proposals, and provides means of enforcement. The primary change that we've added since the first time you saw this was the creation of the Public Arts Advisory Boards and establishing the duties and functions of it and adding additional details for those participants in the program. And after additional consideration, we felt that this is the appropriate time to create that board and its duties as opposed to the subsequent steps. We did discuss during the first time this was before you that the next step is the creation of a art in public places master plan to guide and lead the efforts of this program for the city. But we also believe that if we're establishing the ordinance at this time, that it makes sense to go ahead and put that board into place and the duties and functions of it. And the creation of a new program like this often creates chicken and the egg type scenarios of timing. But since we're establishing the ordinance now, we did believe it appropriate to add these additional details. So the funding aspect of it, we did go through the last time, but quickly, any city development projects, 1% of the budgets would be attributed to art in public places. Private development, 1% of building permit fees for non-residential projects above $50,000 or more would qualify for the art in public places fee of 1%. Or as an alternative to paying the fee, the developer could install art of a equivalent value on their property. The third component of revenue for the program would be a proposed section of the business tax receipt revenue, and I will expound on that in a moment. And then we've also updated this to allow provisions for donations to the program if anyone has charitable cause to do so to the city's program. Again, we are proposing that 1% of business tax receipts collected be diverted to the Art in Public Places program to seed the AIPP program, as we've begun to call it for short. And we have done calculations on what that number would look like based on what the city collected in business tax receipts over the past year and what 1% would be of that. So we're estimating approximately 19,000 based on revenues of the past year. And that would be in addition to anything that's generated at permit fee. I would like to talk more about the Public Art Advisory Board. What we are proposing is that the board will have 7 persons and 2 alternates. Board members would be appointed by City Council. At least 3 members of the board must have an artistic background so that in addition to residents of the community that are interested in this types of program, that we also have artisans that understand the industry and have a more trained eye when it comes to art and the appropriateness of it and knowing that environment. So at least 3 members of the board must have this artistic background. The board would be advisory in nature for installations on private property and for city procurement of art from the Art in Public Places Fund that would be established by the ordinance. They would also provide oversight and recommendations based on the Art in Public Places Master Plan. And if I can, one thing on the Public Art Advisory Board, and when we put in the requirements for this, we looked at models from several cities that have well-established programs. And one provision that we thought would be important to consider in lean times and is the situations in which a board could not make a quorum. We typically don't have that problem with this board and most boards in the city, but there are situations where you don't have enough volunteers or there's an issue with dependability of persons in seats. And the ordinance as drafted has a provision that the Public Art Advisory Board could be suspended if they cannot make a quorum for more than a certain number of meetings. Until the time that that board is fully staffed again, it suggests that the Planning and Zoning Board can serve in the place of the Public Art Advisory Board while it is under suspension for that situation. We looked at models of other cities. In one city, it says that the city manager can make decisions and recommendations on behalf of the Public Art Advisory Board or the equivalent in that locality. That is another model. What we thought best is that we have one of the best and most experienced planning and zoning boards here, and that if there's anyone that's ready to serve, if there is a need, it would be this body here. But staff is recommending that in a scenario where we cannot, for whatever reason, the Public Art Advisory Board cannot operate or is suspended, that the Planning and Zoning Board defaults until the Public Art Board is restaffed. And this just makes sure that any project that is subject to the Art in Public Places program, their project is not stalled because the board cannot function for whatever the cause may be. So again, it's a backup plan. We do fully intend that. And actually, since we've been working on this the last 3 years, we have had multiple volunteers of persons interested in art. So we don't necessarily foresee that it would be an issue to staff the board. We do want to think of all scenarios to make sure there's a backup plan since we are making this a requirement, but we would not want development projects to stall for any issues with volunteerism. So that's what we are proposing. And that's one of the main reasons we wanted to make sure this board had heard what we are proposing in this ordinance. as it relates to the oversight of the Art in Public Places Master Plan. And speaking of the master plan, again, this would be the subsequent step after the ordinance is in place, and we are working with our procurement department of the city as we speak to get the solicitation publicized so that qualified firms can apply to develop the Art in Public Places Master Plan for the city. But it would provide the vision, goals, and objectives of the Art in Public Places program. The Public Art Advisory Board would review projects and private development based on the ordinance and guidance in the master plan, and the plan would be developed using outside consultants and support the proposed ordinance before you this evening. And again, the city staff, as well as our legal advisement, reviewed a lot of different cities when we went to put together this document. This is just a cross-section of the multiple municipalities that we looked at in reviewing and considering what would be the best and most appropriate language for the city of Riviera Beach. And I think you'll find upon looking at this that we are pretty close to the state of these programs as they exist in different municipalities around the state. And we do believe that this puts Riviera Beach on par with some of the premier cities in terms of high quality development in the region and in the state. Staff recommends any feedback or a direction on this. Otherwise, we hope that you would support this with a vote of recommending approval to City Council on what's proposed. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Alan?
Yeah, I have one question. The part that you just added about the planning board taking over if the other board doesn't meet the requirements or whatever. Will you set those meetings up to be the same night as our regular planning board meeting?
We would envision, because this body would review those projects anyway, that a component of your review would also be to weigh in on the proposed art of the project. So we don't envision it creating a bunch of additional time and commitment for this body, but it would be an additional component of the review of this board. But we would have to ensure that in the suspension of the Public Art Advisory Board, that this board is vested with authority to make those recommendations. So, and working with legal, I think we could make sure that that's clear on the record that you are serving in that capacity as well, but we wouldn't envision it to be additional meetings or things of that nature.
Would it be a better process to be able to just bring on 3 people who are of the artistic background and just add them to the planning and zoning board when we do have arts on the table?
I suppose that's a possibility.
And that way it won't be so complicated because we'll still be overseeing the process anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have a meeting for something with art, then those 3 people will be invited to be able to make, the artistic recommendations or whatever like that. And we'll be, like I say, at the same time, we'll be judging on it anyway. So why make it too complicated?
That would probably be less work for staff in terms of having multiple boards to provide staff support to. I would definitely speak with legal to see if we can think fully through anything that would need to be considered for that. But staff is certainly supportive of less boards that we have to, call hearings for and provide support before and after meetings to those. So I would definitely look into that. And if that is the recommendation coming from this body, we can adjust what we have already drafted to reflect that.
I mean, you could recommend it to City Council during their selection process.
Mm-hmm.
We shall see what comes out of that.
For clarification, are we discussing to changing the idea of how the board is prior to creating this board, and just saying we're adding 3 more people, which would be different?
Well, for the board, if that's the situation, you would have to reword it because technically you wouldn't have to bring on a board with 3 people being of artistic background. we will be the other people and just bring on 3 people who already have artistic background, and then we'll call upon those people when we have something of arts on the table.
And that would be because we do not have enough to make quorum, so we've defaulted to the Planning and Zoning Board to be helping, correct? Or is that in general, we're changing the format?
I just think this also because they have to come to the Planning and Zoning Board anyway at some point in time. They have to come to us anyway, so why not see it all at one time?
I only asked because of the changes that we're proposing for the format of the board, and I'm wondering, that's why I was asking if it's prior to that or if it's
Because it'll still be the Planning and Zoning Board, but we'll just have 3 people
I
who
understand.
will be part of that, then they will come when we have something of that,
It's a recommendation to city council because we might not have anybody volunteering for this job that might have art background.
Right.
It might be very difficult to find some. It's just a recommendation that when you're going through your process of bringing on a full-time board member, take over from Ms. Clark, and a part-timer for Mr. Barnes, that maybe they would consider someone in the community with an art background.
No, correct.
So that's all, but not imposing it as part of the ordinance that, they must have an art background if they're going to join the Planning and Zoning Board. Now, that would be too encumbersome on the city council to find. We have enough problems not finding volunteers. And so I would just, it'd be a suggestion. How's that sound?
Now, the only problem I would have with that is that if we bring on people with an art background, then they necessarily won't be qualified for planning and zoning. So the only thing I was saying is that just bring on 3 people far as volunteers who will be of the artistic background, and they will be called upon when we have something of an art coming into the city. And we have to vote on something as far as a beautification project or something like that, then they'll be called on to join us, and they'll be more of the artistic type, and we'll be kind of recommending what's right and what's wrong and what the policies are and everything.
I did want to ask if legal had any thoughts as we kind of talk through this concept.
So if I may, Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
can I just make sure that I'm understanding the process correctly? I think what I'm hearing is the recommendation is the planning board would remain as is with the current membership, but additional members with an expertise in art would be brought on to be part of the planning board, but only brought to vote on art and public place matters. Is that accurate?
Well, let's look at it this
No,
way.
is
If
it-
we only get 2
that's what
volunteers-
I'm hearing,
If we only
because-
get 2 volunteers for the
Yeah.
Planning and Zoning Board and none of them have artistic background, beggars can't be choosy.
Right.
So I would love to bring on a full board plus 2 or 3 art connoisseurs that we can tap their brain up, but let's face the reality of life. Good luck finding volunteers. So it would help us if the 2 that we need to replace, when city council is doing that, maybe they have somebody in the community that's interesting and they happen to have an artistic background, we'll be
Right.
lucky.
Right.
But if we can only find 2 people, I mean, we keep, like I said, beggars can't be choosy.
Mr. Chair, if I may, what you just said is different than what I said. So you're saying take art into consideration when replacing vacancies on the planning board as is, which might help with
That's gonna
in
be
the
hard.
eventuality.
That's gonna be
It's going to be hard to find someone with that maybe that mix of expertise. Can I make a recommendation?
Go for it.
I think we're trying to. I think what I hear is the board is trying to predict into the future, and staff in writing the ordinance, we were all trying to predict in the future. Let's solve a problem before the problem happens. Maybe we should see if a board can be constituted first and how that's going, and then think about how to address the problem if and when it becomes an issue.
I agree, but what's going to happen then is that if we have a full board and let's say no one of artistic comes in, now we still have to bring on 3 additional people to be able to have something for, like you say, an arts connoisseur to be able to come in, to be able to make that. So that, again, I just think more people, more complicated. That's just an idea. I'm just saying.
I think if I may suggest, Mr. Chairman, board members, at some point it'd be good to have like a training session on things like that, on art in public places. This way, like you said, Mr. Fernandez, when we have two people that may not necessarily have the expertise, but maybe we can start to look at training opportunities.
I got a question. When we talk about arts and bringing those things in here, are we talking about the recommendation of pictures and designs and everything? Because I'm pretty sure we all care for art here. Or are we talking about starting from the ground up design and how to put everything into place far as that type of art? Are we talking, art? Or are we just talking about, hey, this would be nice in this area, or this would be this, and this would be great to put in this area? Which one are we?
The board would be making recommendations on, first, what's in the ordinance in terms of what is eligible for art. So it does outline what is and is not art. It defines it, and then it lists multiple considerations that the board has to take into account when making recommendations about the appropriateness of the proposed art. It's possible that in the majority of cases, a development would pay into the fund and walk away from that obligation. And then those who decide to install the art on site would have to contract with the artist, and the ordinance defines what an artist is and is not. And that artist would present a proposal of what their art is going to look like, the certain requirements in their art in public places package of what they have to submit. And then the board would consider everything in there and say, based on it meeting the definition of art, but also things like the maintenance, upkeep of it, plantings and the location of it, whether it fits the intent of the code for public art. So it is similar to what this board does related to the land development code when something comes before you. Does it fit the intention of the land development code? And you make a recommendation to city council based on that. The Public Art Advisory Board would do the same thing, but in the specific lens of looking at the proposed art component of a project. So there are pretty strong guidelines in this proposed ordinance of what you should be looking for and what that board would be considering for public art. But in addition to when a project elects to provide the art on site, that board is responsible for stewardship of the program. So if the majority of developments say, hey, we're going to pay into this account, now we have an account sitting with funds in it that are intended for the art in public places programs of the city, going out and creating solicitations for artists and considering what they're proposing, considering the artists that the city would select to install something at this, intersection or at this city courtyard, things like that. Those are also activities that the board would consider. So we do believe that there are important functions of that board, but for those reasons, we are making sure that we bring in persons who have backgrounds in this particular industry to make the connections needed to attract the best artists and come up with the concepts, but also review the things that they propose. So we do believe that this board is needed. But we are confident based on the feedback that we've gotten so far of people requesting to be involved in art in public places and serve in that capacity for the city. The ordinance does, now I'll make this last point before I give it back to you for questions. The ordinance does state that those persons that have an artistic background, that they do not have to be residents of the city because they're bringing that expertise into the board. So those 3 members are exempt from the residency requirement. The rest would be, again, pulling from the same, to your point, the same pool of volunteers of city residents to serve on civic boards. But those with that expertise would not be required to reside in the city to make sure we can be as successful as possible in recruitment.
I think the beauty of that we'll be able to call up someone from another county or from another city and be able to get ideas from them and then bring them onto the board to be able to, I guess, come up with designs or whatever, we have here to be able to do so. That's why I think it'd be easier just to bring 3 people into the group and then still be able to do everything possible. Here's another question. Besides Blue Heron and Broadway, those areas across from one another, what areas do we have where we can put any kind of public art? What other additional areas do we have?
The primary, one of the primary products of the firm that we are contracting with is to come up with the Art in Public Places master plan that would study the city and highlight our target areas for art. And so we would expect them to identify those best opportunities and the most visible locations for art. So they would develop that plan. We could probably rattle off some places and say, it makes sense here or there, but we want to have a guiding document. Basically, the comprehensive plan for art is what the RFQ and the subsequent firm that we contract with would develop. So they would, one of their main, again, deliverables would be that plan of what are our target locations in the city to install art.
Okay, just an idea. Just an idea to make it easier.
Oh, I have no questions, but I'm looking forward to seeing some beautiful art around our city.
We all are. We believe this is an exciting
We need
initiative.
We need it.
Got a couple questions for you, Mr. Sermons. I know I brought this up the last meeting. We've had some major developers come through planning and zoning. I'm not sure if they've already approached city council. Would we have the ordinance in place? So in those major projects like the 255 townhomes and residential areas on Military Trail, would this ordinance be in effect before they get their permits? So we can use the 1% from these developments, or how is that going to work?
The ordinance is constructed that it updates the fee schedule. So whatever fee schedule is in place when they apply for permits is what's applicable. So it's reasonable that some projects that are already courting the city for entitlements would be subject to this if it moves smoothly. Of course, it is subject to, when it's passed by city council, but it is a possibility, definitely.
What about having those public art in public places in those large developments, like the CRA? I know all the buildings that we've been approving. I know they have spaces in the private development of these large locations, not townhomes, or I'm talking about these large projects. They're going to have walking areas, as you saw by some of them. What about having art in public places in those walking areas? Is that what we're looking at, or are we looking at just public places, public property?
It would be, all of those projects would be subject to it. So if it's a city project, it would be subject to it, as well as private development. We do want to lead by example of what we want to see in our city. So again, if this is approved, that means that when City Hall comes online, that 1% of the construction costs of it, or the equivalent of in art, would be a component of that project. So we believe any project of scale, and you saw the figure above which in construction costs, this automatically is applicable, that would pretty much apply to any city development projects that could be conceived of.
Right, but I'm talking about installing art in those places. Okay, like for instance, Houston has those beautiful bowls. New Orleans has their different monuments all over the place. Miami has them as well. I'm talking about placing those art in those developments.
Okay. Sorry, I think I better
I
understand your
understand with
question
the
now.
contribution, everybody has to contribute, but now can we place that art in those developments? Major developments, not the townhomes.
So on city property, anywhere within those we could identify and say, hey, we want to put it here. If there was a scenario where we thought some private property was an ideal location for some public art, it would definitely require us to engage with that property owner to see if that's something that could be allowed and get whatever legal documents are necessary for the city to be able to install there. But certainly if it's city property or city right-of-way, we could utilize the Art in Public Places Fund to make those installations. And as you mentioned, some cities have done great work to create themes across their city to attract not only aesthetic improvements, but attract tourism to certain cultural themes or artistic themes of those cities.
So would your team be approaching these developers that already received planning and zoning board approval pending the city, like that large military trail project? Would you be approaching them to see if they're amenable about placing public art on their grounds?
If this is approved, I think it's a possibility. I don't think the city is there yet. You know, we would have to establish the fund to, you know, say, hey, we got funds to make us art installation. We think this is a good place. But as we're just getting the fund started, we're probably not ready to make those types of proposals to private property. But that's the vision, though, that on city-owned property or even potentially engaging with private property to really beautify our city.
The language that you stated that will allow the planning and zoning board to be like a backup, approver, is that going to be included in this ordinance that you want us to approve tonight?
Yes, that language is.
'Cause I didn't see it there.
included.
I'm asking you, you're going to include it? I didn't see it in the PowerPoint presentation, unless I missed it.
I'll read the exact language
Do
that
you
we
see
have
anything
proposed.
referencing planning and zoning board in the language?
It does reference it in the language, and I'll read exactly what it says so you can see.
I just want to make sure what the language includes us, the way you presented it. And if it does, then I'm okay with it. And if it's not, we just amend it. I just want to make sure the language covers us, just to.
All right, bear with me for just a moment if you don't
And this is
mind.
going to be for the record ordinance chapter 32, am I correct? Thank you.
Your numbers may be a little off. Under section 32(4.
What number was that particular clause?
Section 32(4). Of F. Mr. Chair, if I may, I can read it. I have it on my.
Would you, ma'am, please?
The Public Art Advisory Board may be suspended by the City Council if the appointed membership is less than 3 members or at least 2 consecutive meetings have been canceled due to the lack of quorum for the transaction of business. In the event the Public Art Advisory Board is suspended, the Planning and Zoning Board shall assume the duties and responsibilities of the Public Art Advisory Board as provided under this chapter.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
All right.
If there's any
Thank you,
other-
Attorney Ely.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just to clarify something for the record, on line 187, it says 2. Well, the
I'm
number is
sorry,
3.
which
You
section are
misheard
you
it.
in? of the ordinance?
Line 187. End of 187?
Is there? What?
Yes, on the left.
Said line 918.
Line 187.
187.
The same section that was just read.
Okay, I'm there, sorry.
Okay, at the end of that sentence
Mm-hmm.
or that line, it says list TTWO, but the number 3 is there. So
I
you need to
see.
clarify that.
Okay, and I think that text was intended to be 3.
3, okay.
Yes. The number is correct. The text is a typo, a Scrivener's error.
Okay.
And I made that edit here.
So it's just a typo, am I correct?
Just a typo, yes.
Yes,
Okay.
and we'll correct that.
Okay. Is there anything else from this board?
But by the way, it's nicely written. I like it.
Thank you,
Sounds,
thank you.
sounds
We spent a lot of time
Yes,
comparing, fleshing this
tell.
out. Yes,
Well done.
thank you.
We're moving up in the world, Mr. Sermons. Thank you very much. Appreciate you and your team's effort.
We are trying to sophisticate the development process here. So thank you all so much for your support and the feedback on this as we work through to move our development processes forward here.
So the art training courses we will have, I suggest, is it the Louvre in the Paris, or are we
True.
going traveling anywhere?
I'll check the budget, Mr. Chair.
Don't send me no YouTube link.
If there's no further questions, did we have any public comment on this, by the way, by any chance?
No, sir. Mr. Chair.
Any citizen comment cards or anything?
None.
None? Okay. Do I have a motion to creating the city code ordinance chapter 32, art in public places, as read into the record by Ms. Davidson and explained by Mr. Sermons?
So move.
Second.
Anthony Brown,
Yes.
James Gallen,
Yes.
William Wiley,
Yes.
Frank Fernandez.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Perfect. Now we go to item A. Would you read it into the record, Ms. Davidson? We got a wonderful citizen here that's been sitting here all night waiting for this wonderful section to be read.
Item 7A, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Riviera Beach, Palm Beach County, Florida, amending the Land Development Code, Chapter 31 zoning, Sections 31-1, 31-61, 31-141, 31-161, 31-187, 31-192, 31-197, 31-222, 31-242, 31-302, 31-322, 31-362, 31-382, 31-422, 31-487, and 31-536, creating sections 31-560, 31-561, 31-562, and 31-563, amending the definitions of family, amending the definitions of the terms multiple family dwelling and duplex dwelling, adding definitions for the terms assisted living facility, community residence, hospital, nursing home, recovery community, recovery residence, specialty medical facility, and specialty hospital, providing for severability, repeal of laws in conflict, codification, and for an effective date.
Thank you. Mr. Sermons?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Clarence Sermons, Director of Development Services, for the record. As with the last item that was before you, since the first time the Planning and Zoning Board voted on this proposed ordinance, there have been significant enough changes such that out of an abundance of caution, we are bringing it back to ensure that the Planning and Zoning Board has reviewed anything that affects the Land Development Code that's voted on by City Council, as is required by our code. And in the document in your backup, we have highlighted the changes that have taken place between first and second reading so that your attention can be drawn to the changes made here. But there were significant enough changes, including the header of this item, such that it was appropriate to bring back before this body. So again, I will try to focus on some of the primary changes since the last time you heard this. But of course, if there are any questions, comments, or concerns regarding this, we're here to hear that from you. So again, with this presentation, I'll talk about the challenges that we are aiming to address with this ordinance that we're proposing. And then as staff has been working closely with our third-party legal on this item. And again, this is a very important topic, but it is also a very litigious topic. So we've been working very closely with third-party legal to ensure that we're paying close details to the problems the challenges we're attempting to address, but as well as making sure we're not leaving the city vulnerable to any legal challenges, and that we are addressing the proposed challenges through this ordinance. So will talk about the first half of some of the challenges that the city is dealing with, and then I will give the floor to Attorney Early to talk about the components of the ordinance that we have been working on. So our police department, who's not able to be here tonight, has dealt with our properties in the city that have operations pertaining to those with disabilities, especially related to drug treatment and where they live to receive that type of treatment within the city. And some of the biggest challenges stemming from that are that our land development code, as we said before, it doesn't have the definitions to identify, one, what is this use? And then if we don't have the definition, we can't say this is where that use is most appropriate based on our development patterns and our zoning regulations. And without those definitions and regulations on where they can go, we also don't have the requirements that if a development is violating or doesn't fit what we have established as the appropriate parameters for those types of uses, we don't have the appropriate courses of enforcement action to follow up and deal with these uses. And you've heard a member of the public just today to talk about some of the effects of that from our residents. And so that's what we're trying to address through this ordinance. One, establish those definitions, look at our zoning code to say where these uses are most appropriate, talk with legal to say what is legally within the bounds of the city, because those with disabilities are a protected class under the federal law, to make sure we are within the bounds of that, but also adding the layer of state law as they apply to these, and then looking at what we can, with those established boundaries, what we can do with our city ordinances at the local level to regulate and make sure and those with disabilities have a opportunity for dignified living here within the city of Riviera Beach as well. So one of the components of creating this ordinance required us to look at what we have right now. So the map on the screen before you identifies the different types of uses related to community treatment, sober homes, community residences, and again, there are different terms related to it. But we looked at what legally established adult living and community living facilities we have in the city. We looked at what treatment facilities we have established in the city, and we looked at what types of sober homes that we are aware of that are operating within the city. And based on this, we believe that what we are creating is an equitable a set of regulations for those who need these types of services and living conditions, with a mind for making sure that we are enabling them to live in a manner where they are set up for success as they go through their recovery periods. And we do know, as it's stated in state statute and just best practices, that oftentimes clustering these uses or types of homes together doesn't set up those individuals for the best chances of success. So just being mindful of where they are right now and considering what the appropriate buffers could be for that was a part of this exercise, and which is why this map is a part of your backup. And so with that, those are the challenges that we are trying to address. And then from here, I'll turn it over to Attorney Early to talk more specifically about what we have proposed and some things that have changed since the first time this was before you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Good evening. Yes, now we can.
Okay, wonderful. So I know the hour is late. I'll try and go as quickly as possible. I'll just go over the ordinance overview. Basically, it provides for residential settings for persons with disabilities. And disability is defined to include persons who are recovering from addiction. That's pursuant to federal law. In addition to that, the ordinance provides opportunities for people who don't meet the definition of family, but who are disabled to reside together in community residences. As Mr. Sermons indicated, it provides new or refined definitions to Chapter 31. It removes terms that are either obsolete or made redundant by these new definitions, and it creates some new non-residential medical uses that previously didn't exist in the code. That was essentially the same the last time you saw it, but I'm just, again, reiterating what it is that the ordinance actually does. So key provisions, the ordinance provides for community residences and for recovery communities. For groups that are 3 and under, they're treated like any other family. And that's important to note. Smaller groups are permitted to reside in all zoning districts that allow residential uses. That is a change from the last version of the ordinance that you saw, but it is one that we believe is consistent with Palm Beach County and other jurisdictions. And we are trying as much as possible to be in line with them. Larger groups, which are groups up to 14, are permitted in all zoning districts that allow multifamily residential uses. There are spacing requirements included, and they are based on the data that Mr. Sermons showed you on that chart before. And the purpose of that is to avoid the creation of a de facto social services district. Studies have shown that when community residences are allowed to locate in a community as of right, there sometimes can be a clustering effect, and to avoid that, we are writing distance requirements into the ordinance. In addition to that, the ordinance requires state certification for recovery residences, and that's either going to be through FAR, or as an alternative, we're also allowing Oxford House charters, which is, they have similar, that's a national program, but they have similar requirements to what FAR would require. So we're allowing that as an alternative. Based on feedback that we got from council, we'd like to make sure that this new version that's before you clarifies that lawfully operating recovery residences will be allowed the opportunity to get FAR certification on or before December 31st, 2024. Therefore, if a recovery residence is in operation right now, we're not going to tell them you have to stop operating right now because you don't have FAR certification. We're going to tell them you have until December 31st, 2024 to get that certification. So again, I think I talked a little bit about some of the changes in this new version that you're seeing, but I'll cover them just quickly as an overview. So first of all, it modifies the definition of family to include domestic partnerships, and it cites the definition of domestic partnership that's included in the Palm Beach County Code. Second of all, it clarifies occupancy limits for multifamily residences, including duplexes. This change I just want to highlight this change because as it's written right now in your code, it states there's no limitation on how many people can live in a duplex or how many people can live in a multifamily dwelling. So this clarifies that. I'll give you an example.
So right now, the definition of multifamily dwelling says it means a building designed to be occupied by 3 or more families. So based on that definition, you could have 3 or more families in one unit. So we don't want that. We want to clarify that, and that's why we're clarifying that it's 3 or more families living independently of one another. So the same thing is for duplexes, that's a building designed to be occupied by 2 families, and we added that language, 2 families residing independently of one another. I think that accurately reflects what is intended when we say duplex, and it accurately reflects what is intended when we say multifamily dwelling. So we wanted to go ahead and fix that in the process of amending Chapter 31. In addition to that, we've added that we've clarified the list of persons that can live in community residences. There's a list in the actual ordinance, and City Council had a question as to whether or not that list was limited to just what you see on the page, or whether or not it is just an example of types of persons who might live in such residences. We clarified that it is exemplary only. It's not limited in any way. The idea is that these residences are for persons with disabilities, period. So the next thing is, as I mentioned before, additional time for operating recovery residences to get their certification. The next thing is that it clarifies that community residences are to be treated as residential property for the enforcement of all building and fire safety codes. And finally, it clarifies the standards for the purpose for the standards that we're in putting in place for non-residential medical facilities. The next steps really don't apply. That was supposed to be for City Council. So what you see now in this slide is basically a chart that kind of shows you by comparison where the new ordinance, the new version of the ordinance that you have in your packet, where we are in relation to other jurisdictions. So you'll see, I'll start with all the way on the right-hand side. You'll see that we're basically in line with all the other jurisdictions in terms of giving operating establishments time to get FAR certification. And then going over, working towards the left-hand side, spacing requirements, that is something that changed. The spacing requirement was lowered to 660 feet for community residences. It's still 1,200 feet for recovery communities. The reason for lowering it to 660 feet is A, to bring it in line with other jurisdictions as much as possible so that we're not an outlier, and also because that number is not, it's not arbitrary. It's based on studies that were done. So Palm Beach County in 2020, when they enacted their community residence code, they had a study done, and that study cited 660 feet as the average size of a city block. And the recommendations that against clustering of community residences are based on how many are on a city block. So I just wanted to let you know that that number is not arbitrary. It's based on studies that have been done, and it's in line. The number that you had before was larger. It was set at 1,000 feet. And you'll see Fort Lauderdale still has that in their code, but I think it's more legally correct and advisable if we want to be as consistent as possible with our neighboring communities. The next thing you'll see on the final side of it is the occupancy limit. That's the same as it was when the ordinance first came to you. You'll see that it differs a little bit from other communities, but after speaking with staff and determining how they want the ordinance to look, we decided not to change that, and that's something that can be amended in the future once the ordinance is put into place and we see actually how it's working. So with that covered, I believe that you've got the ordinance in your backup materials, your case packet. I think I don't even know what time it is. It's very late. I'm clearly not very articulate right now. Have you all had a chance to review it? It's got the changes highlighted in it. And are there any questions for me about anything that I've said?
I have some questions, but I'll hold off. Mr. Gallen,
Not at the time, no.
Mr. Wiley, Mr. Brown.
No questions.
The amount of people, we say families or partner or domestic partnerships, 3 families. You got a 2-bedroom townhouse. Can they have 15 people? They're 3 families, 15 people in a 2-bedroom. Can we limit the amount, realistically, can we limit the amount of people in all residences? Because you can't have 15 people in a 2-bedroom.
So a lot of the cities that you see on that screen are in Broward County. Broward County has a minimum housing standard, and some of those municipalities have adopted that minimum housing standard, and it sets limitations on the number of persons that can live in different types of housing, right? At this time, I don't know that the city has adopted any specific minimum standards that compare the number of residents to square footage. And that's something that I recommend that we talk about in the future.
We definitely have to recommend. You
Because-
see why Fort Lauderdale is so strict? You know the problems of the sober homes that there were or still are in that area? That's why they have the 60 days and 1,000 feet, because this gentleman brought out one of the problems, okay? You can't stick 15, 20 people in a 2-bedroom. And if, Mr. Sermons, if we leave our city ordinance to 3 families and partnerships, they can legally put 15 people in a 2-bedroom. So we need to address how many people in a family or domestic partnership are allowed in a unit.
So let me just clarify something. I think that's an issue that wouldn't be just in relation to this one ordinance. That's a citywide issue.
Correct.
But I just want to clarify that the definition of family that's recommended for this chapter as amended, it doesn't put any limitation. You could be related by blood, marriage, etc. You could have a family of 12 that's biologically related. It doesn't put any limitations on that. Right? But it puts limitations on persons who are not so related from living together. The exception to that rule is the community residences. So for example, a group of 10 unrelated college students could not reside in one dwelling under the ordinance the way that it's proposed right now, because it sets the definition of family at no more than 3 unrelated persons. So the community residence is an exception to that rule. But if and when the city does if and when the city has legislation that addresses the number of people per square footage, that will apply to community residences because it's a safety issue at the end of the day. So again, the controls that we've put on this are basically the controls that the law allows us. We've gone as far as we can probably go based on the state of the law. And yeah, I'll leave it at that.
The law also takes into consideration the safety of the occupants. 15 people in a 2-bedroom, that's a fire hazard. The safety of getting them all out, God forbid, of a fire in a townhome, if they're on the 2nd floor, 15 of them, you're talking about grave bodily harm to one of those. So what you're doing in effect, once you're limiting the amount of people, it's a safety matter. You're basing it on safety, not because you're being prejudicial against one group against the other. So you do it generalized, and then you can't take and say, okay, you can have 15 family members in here, but there's poor groups that needs rehab. They can't have 15 people. But yet, hey, the city allows 15 people to live here. I just want to avoid problems down the line. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, sir. So the goal right now is, right now, it's my understanding that these establishments are, or not these establishments, but that community residences, some operators have come to the city and done what they needed to do. And we know that some operators are in existence right now, and that's why Mr. Sermons had the data that he showed you. But there are a lot that the city probably doesn't know about and that the city can't capture. So the goal right now is to at least take the first step towards getting ahead of that issue, putting some minimum standards in place, particularly when it applies to vulnerable populations, because they've also, I mentioned FAR specifically and Oxford House specifically because it applies to sober homes, basically. I'm just going to call them sober homes. The ordinance doesn't call them that, but
Yes,
for ease of understanding, it applies to sober homes, and it's not something that state law requires. So this ordinance is going above and beyond state law to require that that be done so that those minimum standards are met. So in order to qualify for such certification, they can't be running an establishment that is unsafe or that doesn't meet the qualifications. They've got to submit to inspections and all that kind of thing. So if the longer we wait to get something in place is going to be the longer it takes to get everyone out of the shadows and operating in compliance with best practices. Beyond that, other types of establishments that are community residences that are required to get state licensure, they've got to also follow similar approval processes at the state level to where they've got to be running they've got to be running an establishment that complies with state law. But unless and until there's something on the books that allows all of these things to come out of the shadows, there's going to be no controls. I recognize the issue that you raised with regard to numbers of persons, et cetera. I think that's a life, health, safety issue that is bigger than this ordinance. And at the end of the day, what the law says is that persons who have disabilities are required to be treated like any other person for purposes of housing. And that's what this is at the end of the day. It's supposed to be residential housing. I'm not defending anything. I'm not pro the ordinance. I'm not against the ordinance. I'm just telling you what I believe to be the state of the law.
Correct. You just hit the nail there on the head. Treated like any other person. So if I have a residential unit here with 15 people in 2 bedrooms, how am I going to treat this group here differently? So we have to fix the problem. And then you also raised the issue of the FAR is if I remember correctly, that's a private certification along with the Orthodox group that was put into effect with all the issues with the sober homes. But is there anything in the ordinance that would allow our team to do our own inspections? Because they're going to sell us a great plan. I have this great facility, but unless we have in the ordinance the teeth to enforce it by allowing inspections, we ain't getting anywhere. So we need to have, number one, in the ordinance, authorization for our city teams to inspect these group homes, sober homes, whatever you want to call them, okay, without notice, which they should have no objection because it's the safety of the wonderful people they're treating that we're looking after. And 2, we got to make sure that somebody on the city team follows up on their certifications that they're not dropped, and we do not know that the FAR dropped them, and now 2 years later, something happens. Whoops, FAR dropped them 2 years ago. Well, who was supposed to follow up with the FAR? What I'm looking for is checks and balances. So it's a great start, but we need to add. And the ability for the city to enforce the ordinance by having them allow us to inspect, that's key. That's important.
Well, I will say what I've seen in my research in terms of what other cities have done is, and this is a decision for staff. This is not my decision. I write down what I get an idea of what staff wants and I try to write it. That's so I don't want to overstep, and Mr. Sermons, please step in if I'm saying something that you disagree with. So this is just what I've seen in my research, that a lot of all of the cities that you see on there in the far right side of that chart that have double stars. Do you see those where it says yes within 1 year, star? The star means that they've got an annual registration requirement. So community residences each year have to submit a form saying, maybe not registration, reporting requirement might be the better thing. They have to fill out a form and provide it once a year. They have a date set in their ordinance that says, we're operating, this is how many people live in the residence, and this is our proof of certification. So that's an example of a check or balance that has been done before and that would probably withstand legal challenge.
Yes, that's what I'm talking about. We need to incorporate that into this ordinance. And I'll tell you one
Mr.
thing,
Chair.
once it gets out that this is how we do it, you're going to avoid the type of rehabilitations that are just here to make money and could care less about the people they're treating. Mr. Sermons.
I would just add that our BTR process does check for appropriate documentation. So if and when the FARR certification is a requirement for that type of use, every year when they renew their BTR, they're required to provide proof that they have that certification, or they would not receive the right to continue that business there. So that is a built-in check and balance there that would allow staff to ensure that this that these certifications stay in place. Additionally, we do inspections as well when those applicants apply for uses such as these. We have, including fire and the building official, go out to these properties to make sure that no one is creating a type of residence that that is inappropriate, or a situation where someone would have illegally subdivided a one-unit apartment to create 3 units in there to, fit far more people than what would fit our standards. So we do go out and check these properties when they apply for their BTR, and when they're renewing, they have to provide that paperwork to make sure they're staying on top of all of the documentation and certifications that are required. So we do have, through that process alone, we have a considerable amount of oversight that the city is able to provide.
Good. That's great. They make an application, fire department goes in, city goes in, building is great. They tell you there's only going to be 4 people in here. There's 12 people there. Who goes back to check them? Who goes in to check them to make sure they're abiding by the rules?
So the frequency of the inspections, I will have to, to make sure I don't misstate anything on the record, I have to double check on that. I believe fire at a minimum goes out regularly or annually to ensure that these properties are meeting the fire code, and which deals with capacity and that type of thing. But I will research that and provide that information to the board just to make sure I'm not misstating anything.
We need to spot check. We can't have people all over the streets, in and out, traffic in and out, and then 15 people in a 2-bedroom. Okay, the only way we're going to do that is by spot checking them. Okay, so that's what we need to get into the ordinance. We got to show, if you want to come into our city, you need these certifications. Okay, and we're going to be doing spot checks throughout the year to make sure that you're following the rules.
And what are the rules?
And
Well,
make
the
sure
road
they
is-
know the rules. What I'm trying to do is, I want checks and balances. If you guys want to go and visit Fort Lauderdale and visit the sober homes and just talk to the sober home task force of the issues they had, you would be appalled. That's why they have the 60-day requirement, the little double asterisks in there, because they lived through it. I am trying to avoid what happened in Broward and Dade, where I live. I lived through it, so I want to avoid it. Am I clear? And by avoiding it is by sending the message to these rehab group homes that are coming here. When they find out that we have these strict certifications requirements, and we're going to be doing spot checks on these locations, they don't want that. They're going to be picking up and going somewhere else. Okay? So can we please incorporate that? And I would suggest anyone here, instead of reading it on Google or making a call, visit the sober home task forces in Broward. They will be more than glad to show you pictures, go over details, reports, and they can even give you a wonderful tour of the area. All right, personally and physically be there. But that's it for me. I don't want to take more time because it is getting late. Does anybody else on the board have any other comments?
Chair,
Yes,
is there any type of, are they required to have any type of security or any, I should say, curfews?
So no, and here's why, because again, the law basically says that these types of residences are, they are supposed to be compared as much as possible to a private person's home. So to the extent that we can't tell you necessarily to have security for your private home, or that the city couldn't necessarily, or would not necessarily in most cases, make that a condition of approval or something like that, we would have to treat them the same way. The same thing goes with, spot checking. I mean, that's something that would have to be researched to make sure that it's legally solid. But again, the law is the way it is. So curfew is the same thing. You wouldn't, the city wouldn't necessarily be able to tell you to observe a curfew unless there are extraordinary circumstances like a natural disaster, that type of thing.
Yeah, just keep in mind, the law also looks for the community, the safety of the community, and the individuals in the group home. So if we have group homes with multiple people riding around, and we happen to have areas where coincidentally there's more burglaries to vehicles and residences near the group homes, then the city has a right to protect the citizens, okay, and go back and address the situation. And this is what, it's a safety matter. So when it involves the safety of the group home members and or the community, we can address it. And I don't think any court, you just can't pick on them and say, I want you to have a security team as soon as you give me your application. Can't do that. But now let's just say hypothetically, we go into Cabana Road and we see this traffic of people in and out all over the road, all over the map, walking everywhere. And this hypothetically also a strong breaking car, more burglaries in that area than there ever been after this sober home, and you got all this traffic of people. There's a safety issue there. Okay, they're supposed to be getting treatment. They're not supposed to be roaming around the streets, up and down the streets. And as far as curfews goes, cities have passed curfews on juveniles. I'm not sure if we can address it to adults with no national emergency, but that's a whole different topic. And I've been in those cities, and the curfews have worked and they haven't worked. Some have not. But again, it's what the city enforces, what the city does is what these wonderful people that are moving into our community will adhere to. That's what I'm saying. Consider the safety of the public and the group on an equal level. That make sense?
And I can just add that To Attorney Early's point, we can't do things to single out a certain type of population and impose restrictions on them that don't apply to other residents in the city. But to your point about certain locations causing a disproportionate burden on the community around them, but namely city services. The city does have a chronic nuisance ordinance that was enacted within the last 3 years, that if a property meets certain conditions, chief of which being that they have received a certain number of calls for police or emergency response services in a certain period of time, the city has additional powers that it can utilize to impose certain actions on that particular property. The goal initially is to engage with the property owner, and the city has certain powers to create things like hours of operation, or make sure they come up with a plan to address any nuisances that property has created on the city. And through that ordinance, the police department can address individual properties that are causing nuisances. But so in situations where there are those types of operations in the city, if the residents around it are calling the police when they observe certain things, they document, they keep that data, and once the data reaches a certain threshold, they are able to utilize their powers to create additional requirements on that property to make sure that they're no longer a burden to the city. And there are progressive methods of enforcement that the city has, some significant ones to address those types of issues. But the first steps are working with the landlord and them agreeing to certain types of hours of operation. Could be one thing, curfews and that kind of thing, but it could progress to the city taking action against the property itself.
Imagine on top of that, we have the checks and balances of the authority to, when you have 14, 15 people outside and going in and out of the residence, having code enforcement, someone else going in there and realizing you got 20 people in a 2-bedroom. That your plan here, when you submitted it, called for 4. Now you got 20 in there. These are the names because we were there. That's what I'm talking about.
Understood.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Concerns? Oop, okay.
No covered.
We're good to go. Okay, do I have a motion to amend the Land Development Code, Chapter 31, the zoning sections read into the record by Ms. Davidson?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, we do have a public comment card for item A.
Oh, we do? I'm so sorry, I didn't
Yes.
see it. Go ahead, sir.
All right.
Mr.
No,
Sullivan?
go for it.
There's a lot of conversation. I really respect everybody's input in that. We got to stop saying surveys. We got to drive down the street and observe.
Yes.
Surveys, you can do to any community and do surveys. All I ask you is go down the street and observe, and you're going to see what's going on. I have fire trucks, ambulance, police going down the street, but shut their sirens off when they get to the facility, so nobody else knows. So where do the community, the people that are going to complain? Because there's nothing going on that night. You don't see anything. It's quiet. Okay, I'm around. I see the stuff that's going on with the fire departments and the police department. I'll give you one example. I had someone go onto my property. I called the police department. They come down and they called an ambulance for the person going on my property because he needed to get an ambulance to the hospital because he was on drugs. Nothing about going on my property. Nothing. In my backyard with my family. Called the police. They took him to the hospital. He needed help. Wow. Wow. So I just give you a little example of that, but just to touch base real quick, just some highlights here. 3 families to what? A room and a facility? Thank you for bringing that up, because I'm telling you, you say 3, how many bedrooms? And that was my example about item B, townhouses, because they're going to sell them and they're going to fill them up with drug rehabilitation, sober, whatever they may be. And I'll tell you what, I'll call anybody a family and see how far that goes. Separation of properties. Are we going to have any kind of density? If you come down, you have the world's most beautiful diving facility right down there, and people come. I have an Airbnb. They come for that. They're paying quite a bit of money to hang out, paying taxes for this. How much tax money are you getting from these residents in these sober homes? I don't know. I saw quite a bit of money, but I don't know where it's being shared. You should be, as we're talking about the gentleman with Thermo King, about him bringing people in. We're bringing money into this city, and I love it. So, and all those facilities all around Cabana, they're all there. You can just check it. And I went to the city hall and asked for permits and gave them addresses. They never got back to me on it. So they didn't even know. But when you bring up the Disability Act, everybody steps back. I understand the Disability Act. I want people to get help, but you got to separate. You can't have full community area, Cabana, South Yard Harbor, just completely full of sober homes, completely. Spread them out. Man, it gets crazy. So, are they residents of Riviera Beach? Are they just going to stay there for 30 days? Because I see the drug people come back and give them drugs so they can get busted, do another drug test, and continue on in their homes. I've seen it. I observed it. It happens. So what are they doing for the drug tester? Because they're paying a lot of money. I was just in Boston. I heard advertisements for Ambrosia down here. Come down to the best place to live and community. Bring them down here. They're bringing them down by the hundreds. Again, the tourists, the best diving area around. Who's going to the homes to inspect them? I mean, I've called the police, and again, somebody walked to my property, and that was the end of it. So there is no inspections going on. The trash go around there. They leave the barrels outside. The trash is there. They don't stay in the house. They all sit outside. It looks really good in my Airbnb when people are coming by and just everybody's walking around. It just looks very uncomfortable in the neighborhood. It really does. It's not any control. Again, with the city hall stuff, but that, you know, that's where it's at. I just bring it out in density, spread it out a little more. It's just one huge community over there.
Thank you.
And it's killing me, killing my property. My value is, I mean, the only way I'm going to make money is to sell it to this or rent my bedrooms out to 3 families per bedroom, and I'll make a killing.
That's Mr. Sermons, he's got a point. I got an Airbnb. I'll put 15 people in one bedroom.
You know, and forget the inspections. I'll just know when the inspection's coming, and I'll get them out for a day to go to the beach. But thank you, everybody, for your.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it,
Thank
Alex.
you, sir. Appreciate your comments.
Absolutely right.
Mr. Sermons, just a suggestion. Whenever a fire department or police department goes to a particular residence, no matter whether it be a drug haven or a group home, sober home, whatever, they generate a service call. If you would want your your team members, they can just call the fire department and police and have them service calls. I want the service calls to this particular address, and they will provide them to you. And then together, somebody there should be getting all these sober homes, all these issues we're getting, and they're just getting a list of how many service calls they're getting to the location and what those service calls are all about. And then you can do your spot inspections, so you can do everything else. You can use the nuisance ordinance. There are ways to do it. And again, I really go down to the sober task force down in Broward and Dade. All these tools have been used, and I'll be more than glad to talk to you offline. The tools are at our hands, and they're there. So we can nip it in the bud. And then those folks that want to advertise to come down to Florida, they won't come to Riviera Beach because they know we have strict policies. They're going to open up in Pompano or stick back down to Broward. Fort Lauderdale's already cracking down. But again, thank you for the comment. If there's nothing else from the board or Mr.
Mr. Chair, so how do you suggest we move on this ordinance?
I'm sorry?
How do you suggest we move on this ordinance we have here in front of us? What do you think we should do?
Well, we already have the highlights. The staff recommends passing the current ordinance, or can we amend it and add the tools that we just mentioned here tonight? The inspections, the checks, the amount of what you really think a family or the number, the amounts or members, or what is your suggestion, council?
Mr. Chair, I want to clarify something. The amendment to the ordinance was not done to allow 3 families to live in one residence. It was done to correct that issue in the ordinance. It's designed to do the opposite of that. 1 family per residence. So the issue is, how do you define family? Right. So I just wanted to clarify that. In terms of any substantive changes, I'm going to defer to staff's recommendations and the board's recommendations. My only role is to ensure that it's consistent with the law.
Mr. Sermons, so would you suggest passing this as recommended by staff and then looking into the suggestions, maybe amending it down the road? Or what would your suggestion be?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think of the things that we heard expressed this evening, one attorney earlier just addressed as far as us clarifying that when we say multifamily, we mean, or 3 families per building, we're meaning 1 family per unit or per residence. So the ordinance does address that already. The inspections, I think clarifying that the annual renewal process will involve renewal inspections or persons coming out on the property at least once a year is something that makes sense. We are already doing it with our ALF process when they renew, but putting that in the code, making sure that it's understood that that's something that happens annually. Anything more than that, I think, gets subject to us potentially targeting spot inspections and things like that. I don't know if legally we would be able to do that, but at a minimum, the annual inspections, we will take that into account and codify that into the code. But I believe that would address the majority of what staff can do within the bounds of the law based on what was expressed tonight.
Okay, let me just give you a little suggestion. If you pull the service calls, fire department, fire rescue, and the police department, you got 30 calls to 1 residence in 1 month, and you got 10 overdoses. I don't think they're the group home. And if you submit that data too far, they will be stripped of any certification. And if you submit it to the state, they will also look into their certification. That's my humble suggestion. Could that be done?
I did mean to add earlier that the police department does collect that data already. I cannot speak for what steps they take with it. They have a task force dedicated to these types of uses, and I know that they weren't able to participate this evening, but they have a person that is prepared to speak on how the police department is handling those challenges at this time. But when it comes to enforcement activity of criminal behavior or emergency response calls and things like that to certain locations, it is out of the purview of land development. But continuing that conversation with the police and fire department, I would say, is a good next step for that.
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay, based on staff recommendation, if there's no other questions, do I have a motion?
The family, the number? Do we specify the number? How are we going to deem what a family would be deemed as far as the number of people in the household? Is that something that's going to be clarified on there, or are we still yet to determine?
I don't
that?
think we have determined yet, or what specific numbers there are assigned to a family or a domestic partnership.
That is correct. The way that the language reads, there's a specification as far as numbers of unrelated persons living together in a family-like environment, and that's capped at 3. The community residences are going to be your exception to that based on ADA accommodations.
All right. Without further ado, based on the staff recommendation and discussions we had tonight, do we have a motion to creating the City Code Ordinance Chapter 32 as discussed and detailed by attorney and Mr. Sermons?
So moved. Second.
Anthony Brown,
Yes.
James Gallen,
Yes.
William Wiley,
Yes.
Frank Fernandez.
Yes.
Unanimous vote.
Moving on, workshop items.
None, Mr. Chair.
Do we have any public comment?
None, sir.
Staff updates, the comprehensive plan update.
We clearly took too long that the computer decided that it went to sleep too.
You mean Walter's asleep? What'd you say? I'm sorry, the computer?
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Good evening, board members.
Good evening.
But I should have gone first before my only audience member disappears on me. So it repeats itself. It's all right. All right. Good evening, everyone. I will be doing our update for the month of November. As I talked about last month, I talked about that we are in a phase of drafting our goals, objectives, and policy. And the emphasis that we're doing right now is on our housing. As we all know, housing is one of our critical points that are happening around the country right now. And so what we're working on as our consulting team, as well as our steering committee members, is looking at our goals, objectives, and policies. The way we're doing it right now is we're working with our consulting team where we look at our original goal that we had or goals that we have, and then we start to see what was our language. And then from there, our team worked months ago, our team worked on their own language of what they thought was missing from the plan. And so our consulting team, CGA, they would compare the goals that we currently have, the language that staff has suggested or comments that staff made or our board members have made, and they've come up with their with language that they believe exemplifies what we're doing. And so we're going right now is through a back and forth. We're going in a back and forth of language of saying, yeah, this was the idea. Yes, you captured it well, or this is not what we were looking for. And so that is the big deal with that one. In addition to doing that, we're also working with our Housing for All committee. And we're going through different action items that is called out in the plan, the Palm Beach County plan. And remember that we are one of the pilot programs. And so the idea is that we would pull those action items, and the ones that come out that are important for us, we'll be adding that to the plan, to our comprehensive plan language if it does not exist as it is today. And so that's been an exciting. One of the most exciting things that came out on the 1st of this month was the housing equity study. That's part of the Housing for All initiative. Is examining our community, and when I say our community, Palm Beach County as a whole. And so what it informs is it's going to be informing our policies as we talk about unsupported, as we talk about supporting our underserved communities of color in particular, as we talk about home ownership as a city, and gentrification, and how do we combat gentrification. Other aspects that we'll be adding to the equity aspect to our own comprehensive plan is that AARP will be supporting the development of our equitable policies for our aging community as well. We're also looking at land use right now as a staff, and this has been really fun and exciting. I put down there, that is not a picture of our steering committee meeting. I quickly took that picture, but it's an example of the work that we're doing as a team. As what we're doing right now is providing detailed comments on our policies as we go through our policies and kind of commenting like, how do we want this to really feel? And based off of our meetings that we have here, as well as what the community members have said through surveys, as well as through coming into our different council meetings or other public sessions. Also, we're reviewing consultant language that they have been providing for our land use. And then our staff also will be developing needed goals and objectives that we feel has been missing. And it does not allow us to do what we feel would help our community grow best based off of your own comments that you gave at the beginning of this process and throughout our different meetings. Lastly, what we're talking about, we recently launched a business community survey within the last week or two. And so we have businesses that have been sending in their comments based off of how we as a city can support them best. And that has been interesting so far. I'm asking you all also to encourage the business owners that you know, and if they have not answered this survey yet, to please do so, in order for us to really understand ways that we can support our businesses. And that is pretty much the update that we have for our comprehensive plan this month. So if you have any questions or any thoughts, last time we had some great suggestion from you all, and we were able to incorporate that into our data inventory analysis that our team has been working on. And thank you for that. So any today?
No question. Mr. Wiley? Mr. Brown?
I hope it's not because of the time.
No question. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. Have a
Doing
great
a great
evening.
job. Correspondence, do we have any correspondence?
Mr. Chair, you have in front of you, each member, you have a copy of the proposed schedule for next year, 2024, meeting schedule.
Perfect. Planning and Zoning Board comments. I see here there's a training workshop Friday, November 17th on the list. Do we have details on it?
9D?
Yes. Yes.
Was this a late edition?
It wasn't. It's a late hour, not a late edition. We will send to you after this meeting, but annually the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, and forgive me if I've misstated their name, host a workshop for elected and appointed officials to provide an overview of the land development process, the state of the industry in terms of regulations, and the overall training of the role of elected and appointed officials in the land development process. And this is sponsored by the American Planning Association, which is the national standard for professionals in the industry for urban planning. And this happens annually. And I believe last year there were 2 or 3 members of this board that participated and came back with certificates and lots of feedback and thoughts on how we could progress our city in that respect. So that workshop has come back around this year, and at the expense of the budget for the board, we are providing registration for any board members that want to participate. Again, after this meeting, we will forward the invite information from the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council so that those who are interested can let us know, and we can get you registered and provide additional detailed instructions on the event.
Thank you.
It is an all-day training, and yes, Friday, November 17th.
Okay. The next upcoming planning and board meeting, December 14th. Am I correct on reading that date?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Is there anything else?
Sorry. I did forget to tell you, in your email boxes, you'll be receiving the equity study that I referred to earlier. You're receiving that equity study for you all to read through. It's a short, fun read. Get excited. Okay.
Thrilled. Thank you so much. If there's nothing else, do I have a motion to adjourn? It is 9:51 p.m.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye.